All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Mic'd in New Haven podcast, episode 66. An episode I'm really amped up about as the Tales from the Boom Room miniseries continues. I'll introduce my guest in a moment. If you haven't checked out episode 65, the previous episode of the podcast, please do so, as I had the chance to speak with former New York Mets manager Bobby Valentine. Bobby V spoke about his years in New York, especially those 1999 and 2000 seasons, in which he took the Mets on deep playoff runs, including obviously that World Series clash against the Yankees, the Subway Series back in the year 2000. So, Tales from the Boom Room, you might be wondering what that is. Tales from the Boom Room is a mini-series within the podcast in which I chronicle not just former members of the NYPD, but also former members of the NYPD's Arson and Explosion Squad, as well as the NYPD's Bomb Squad. We had Bill Ryan on, who was in the Arson and Explosion Squad for 13 years out of his 20-year career, and he was great. It was a two-part special. And my next guest is just as interesting. He was in the Bomb Squad. Who is my next guest? Well, he's a man who had one of the most interesting careers a man could have in law enforcement, serving with the New York City Police Department from 1980 to 2000. He retired with the rank of detective second grade with the NYPD's Bomb Squad. A former Marine, he also served as the unit's intelligence coordinator, and it was his work that was widely praised as having helped solve the 1993 terrorist bombing of the World Trade Center. And there's so much more to his life. It's not just that. So much so that in 2019, with the help of a great writer by the name of Jeff Ingber, his book, Rendered Safe, Tales of an NYPD Bomb Tech, was released, and it's available for all to read. Retired NYPD Bomb Squad detective, second grade, Don Sadowy, joins me now on the Mike to New Haven podcast. Don, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. I'm really excited about this. You and I have been talking a lot off air, and I can't wait for the listeners to hear your amazing stories finally on the air. I made the mistake of not having the book next to me. I have to go get it soon, and I will momentarily so the audience can see it. So first things first, before we get to everything you did with the NYPD and more, obviously, your early years were really interesting. It's kind of similar in terms of, we talked about it off the air, your background and my background. Raised by a single mother, you grew up in the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn. Tell the audience about your early years.
It was pretty humble. We lived in the apartment building above a bar and grill that my grandparents owned and operated, and it was a very successful business from the late 1920s all the way up to about 1968. And the father figures for me were my uncles, in particular my Uncle Alex, who helped raise me. He was a wounded World War II veteran. And I guess the best way to sum it up was I was a very shy, scared, quiet child. And I spoke with a couple of other detectives that grew up in that area, in that era. And the thing that we found commonality with was that we were poor, but we didn't know it. You know, we had a roof over our head. We had food on the table. I had clean clothes to wear. And I witnessed a lot of what went on in the waterfront through the eyes of a child. It almost mirrored the movie with Marlon Brando from the 50s, On the Waterfront.
Yeah.
We had, at any given time, there was a bookie who hung out in the bar. The bosses from the Longshoremen's Union, tugboat captains, owners of the factories in the area. It was like, these were like the quiet movers and shakers of the waterfront. And I would go in and be able to get a little bit of food now and then or something to drink. But you could see my grandfather was holding court at the end of the bar. It was a pretty big place. All the way at the end, if you were just a neighborhood guy, you didn't go down there. That's where people were talking business in private. There was a public phone booth, and nobody was allowed to use it because that was used for the bookie who would get phone calls, and he would make phone calls out, doing the numbers. Longshoremen would come and go. My grandmother and my mother would work the kitchen. Was open from 5:30 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. And my uncles and my grandfather would work the bar. And I was just when I think about it, just a very shy, frightened most of the time, quiet child. So that's really my childhood as I remember it.
It's interesting when you share the bookie detail, because that is old school New York right now. Because now, and I don't gamble, I don't really like that stuff. I like to be smart with my money, but when you hear now, I mean, there's these apps and everything's available for everyone to just do it in a mainstream fashion to where, whatever. But back then, I mean, listen, if you fell behind on something, it's not like now, whatever, I'll just get them next time. I mean, if you fell behind on something, you might need a new pair of kneecaps after a while.
Well, there was besides the bookie, there was the loan shark.
Yeah.
He would come in once a week, and I never witnessed any violence.
At least.
Well, not that I could see. I was just a little kid, and I didn't hang out there. I wasn't allowed to hang out in there. I'd just go in there and, ask my grandfather or my grandmother or my uncle, if I can have a soda or if I can have something to eat, and I would just come and go. I used to collect the beer bottles and the soda bottles with my grandmother's shopping cart, and bring them back. And my uncles, I know that they never said anything, but I guess I was a pain in the behind, because I came back with a lot of bottles. The regular soda bottles were 2 cents, and the big beer bottles the empties were 5 cents. So that's how I got my spending money,
Okay. Yeah. Smart. That's resourceful, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, what are the things that you talked about in the book? I mean, high school is just, and we talked about it off the air, of course. High school is a really strange time, because it's not like middle school where you're young and, to generalize it, you're pretty much young and stupid. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what life's about. High school, you're starting to get a little bit more aware of the world. Maybe you got your driver's license by the time you're 16. Maybe you're working your first job. And, it's difficult in that sense, because you're still battling with your body. Maybe you're hitting puberty and things like that. There's just a range of things combining that makes life a bit of a tricky thing to navigate that age. And you went to Brooklyn Automotive, which would play a key role later on in your career with the NYPD's Bomb Squad. But during your time there, I mean, you had to try to get an education while attending school with, violent gang members being your classmates. There was fights all the time. And the exact quote that you have in the book is, "You couldn't walk in certain hallways or take certain stairways, or you get the crap beat out of you. I couldn't wait to graduate." End quote. So even in negative environments, you can still learn a lot, however. So what did being in an environment like that teach you, not just about, obviously, automotives and basic education, but also about life?
It taught me very quickly realities. There were gangs out there. They're very violent. You could be stabbed. You could be murdered. You could be beat up very badly. I tried to stay away as much as I could. One time I had to fight back. I carried a tire iron. It rolled up in my coveralls. It's about 1.25 inches forged steel and about 16 inches long. And one day I just had to fight for my life on the stairwell. What was really sad was that I had a history teacher, the teachers there were really, they were older people, they were like in their 60s, I'm 16, 17. And he would mark me late every day if I was a minute late coming into that classroom. And I told him in confidence that I was scared for my safety because of these gangs that hung out in the stairwells. He didn't want to hear it, and told me, if I'm late again, that's it. You're going to fail. You're going to fail for this quarter. I tried going to the administration. They didn't want to know anything. The gangs ran that school at the time. It was horrible. I lived a life in fear. It was really one of the most horrible times of my life. I got no support from the administration, from the teachers. And then, unfortunately, I'm not proud of it, but I had to take the situation in my own hands. And that's when I carried a tire iron. And when I was attacked on the stairwell, I fought for my life. And it's an ugly part of my past. Not proud of it, but it happened. I was called. I went up to the history class. I made it You see, that was another thing. This teacher did not want to hear anything why I took the long way to go upstairs instead of taking the short way, between classes. And I get in his class and my heart's pounding out of my chest. I'm sweating. I'm scared. I just fought 3 guys in a stairwell, 3 or 4 guys. I'm a shy, scared kid. And I'm sitting in the class. And about 10 minutes later, some kid comes up from the office with a note from the dean to have me come immediately down to the principal's office. I came down. I sat on a bench, in this old school, office setting, this big open space on a big long oak bench from the 1930s. And I'm scared. And I just said to myself, if they call the police and I get arrested, well, so be it. But I'm going to tell the whole world who'll ever listen that I got no help from this administration, these teachers, and they let these gangs rule the school. So I could hear a lot of yelling behind this big oak door with the milk glass, that says principal on it. A lot of yelling going on in there. And the dean comes out, looks at me, gives me a dirty look, and I feel like I'm about to have the axe fall. I guess I'm going to be locked up, whatever. And he goes back in there. There's more yelling. And I think, that was me thinking as a child, a shy child who didn't know anything, shy kid. And in hindsight, as a man today, as an older person, I think they knew about these things. They didn't want to deal with it. They covered it up. And now the stuff hit the fan. And now they were forced to deal with it. So what happened was Dean came out, said something to one of the secretaries, whispered to her. She wrote a note. She smiled at me and she says, go ahead back to class. I never heard another word about this officially from anybody, not from the principal, the dean, or the teachers. And I continued to carry that tire iron. And when I went down into the lunchroom the next day, all the bad guys, they like to intimidate people. I sat with my back against the wall on a bench, with those big picnic style tables in the cafeteria. Very, very old. I mean, the cafeteria, the paint was peeling. Almost nobody bought food down there. The food was awful, to say the least. So I would bring like a bologna sandwich and a bag of chips and a soda. And I sat with my back against the wall. And I could tell these bad guys are like, eyeballing me. And I'm not blinking. I'm looking right back at them. And from that point on, they backed off. I fought back. And I put a hurting on some of these guys. And I guess, I was tired of being the victim. And that's really what it came down to. Not proud of it, but
no, of course not.
It was a matter of survival.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I said this to you the other day. We have led really, although our career paths were different, obviously, in terms of our upbringing, we've led really similar lives because my school was bad, not to that extent, but it was bad in that sense because we had a lot of kids from the inner city neighborhoods down here in New Haven. I went to a middle school called East Rock Elementary. And, listen, I try to be a peaceable guy. I hate conflict. I despise it. It's just, there's no use for it.
I do too.
And, it's something to where one day, I had these bigger kids harassing me, played football outside of school. You know the type. They're big. And I carried around, not as a weapon, but I would bring my own lunch. And I had to keep it cold. I would have an ice pack at the front of the lunchbox.
Yeah.
One day I'm by the stairwell and I told the principals, I said, I was legitimately fearful for my safety. And I thought I was scared. How many people have died, get into a fight, they fall, they hit their head up a staircase. It happens. Yeah. You probably saw it in your patrol years. And so I took out an ice pack because this big football playing kid was about to hammer me. And we were fist fighting and he was getting the better of me. He had a size advantage on me, but I was hanging tough. I just had to grab the ice pack and I whacked him with it. And his nose looked like, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah.
And of course, I felt terrible. I felt terrible about it. I started bawling because my thought process as an 11-year-old was, oh my God, what's my mom going to say? And I had to tell, they wanted to charge me. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I would have fallen and broken some bones, or worse yet, been knocked unconscious or died, then what? But that was the thing. They didn't want to deal with it at that point. And also, you know what? I think they were intimidated by these kids because we had a lot of female teachers, not older, younger, like in their 30s and stuff like that, but they were female. And you're up against these large kids, and these kids don't have any respect nowadays. And it's a dangerous thing. And, you would see it. And it kind of, I don't want to say it embitters you, but it kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, kind of does. Because, for example, uniform, we had a uniform policy. They wouldn't wear the uniform. Every once in a while, I always wore the uniform, but once in a while, you just want to switch it up. You want to wear some clothes that make you feel good. I'd wear clothes. First thing I hear when I come to the cafeteria, first thing in the morning, why are you not wearing your uniform? Like, wait a minute, so it's just stuff like that, when you were saying that, I'm like, wow, that's exactly how, to a similar extent, I grew up. So, upon graduating and finally getting out of there, and we're talking with retired NYPD Bomb Squad Detective Don Sadowy here in the Mike and podcast. One person's in the live chat. It's Bill Ryan. Bill Ryan's watching us. He says, hello, everyone. Bill, thank you for being here. Appreciate you stopping by. So upon graduating, you did enroll in college, and you didn't want to use your automotive industry background to, as you put it, toil away in a factory for like the next 3 decades of your life. And I understand. So you made a leap of faith to enlist in the Marine Corps, and your main inspiration being, who you mentioned earlier, your uncles, both of whom had served in the Army. So it wasn't easy convincing your mother, understandably, I should say, to let you join. But given how important a life decision this was, I mean, when you were thinking about joining the Marines, I mean, how did you convince yourself that this was the right move for you?
At 17, now, taking a step back in time, there were protests, riots in the street, really violent protests and violence against the war in Vietnam. Things were scaling down, but there was this element of violence that was going on around the country. I always felt kind of patriotic, that I love my country, and I would like to do something to serve my country. And I spoke to my uncles about going into the service. But prior to that, I realistically sat back at 17 years old. I was in high school till I was 18 and I graduated. But I started looking at what's the future for me? What are the job prospects for a guy like myself? The economy wasn't really good at that time. As you know, it fluctuates like every 10 years or more.
Right. Yeah.
I had no connections to get a job. I did not want to be an auto mechanic for the rest of my life. I just didn't. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, I don't think I really had the aptitude for it. Some people get into a vocational training and they find their niche, whether it's being a plumber, a carpenter, auto mechanic. I just sensed this wasn't for me. And my mother and aunt, God bless them, they didn't have the wherewithal. And my grandparents, they were off the boat from Europe, and all they knew was, working in the bar and grill. And my grandfather moved in different circles with people on the waterfront, and I couldn't picture myself being in a factory the rest of my life. There were a lot of factories that were still up and running at that time, all along the waterfront. I just couldn't picture my life being like that. And then I would see many of my uncles and aunts. There were 8 of them. And of course, when my grandparents were alive, for the major holidays, Christmas, Easter, everybody would come to grandma's house. So I get to see my cousins, and I would hear them talk about what they were doing. Mostly my uncles, the men. They were very unhappy in their lives, not with their family, but they felt they were working in jobs they really didn't like, with no future, but they had to put food on the table. They had to pay the bills. And, now that they're older, they're stuck. They're stuck in whatever it was that they were doing. There was a thing called the McCarthy Era. And I remember the tail end of it. My uncles had East European sounding names. And during the McCarthy Era, if you had an accent from Eastern Europe, if you had a name that was from Eastern Europe, you would they talk about discrimination. I saw this firsthand with my family. They lost jobs.
Simply because of that.
Yeah, because the McCarthy Era basically was saying that there's communism here, and it's spreading, and it's going to take over the country, and there's like sleeper cells here, of people who are in our community. I'll just give you.
Just before we continue, just for my listeners that don't know what you're referencing, what he's referencing is Senator Joseph McCarthy, who's one of the more controversial figures in American history. He's the guy that, we've learned about him in history class, but if you haven't, you look him up, he was an idiot, basically. He held up these papers one day, and this is full, gaslighting at its purest. He said, I know there's 50 communists working in the State Department, and that created this entire scare throughout the country. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want the audience to know.
No, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm just searching my memory as I'm speaking to you about this. I'll just give one example.
Please do.
My one uncle was, his real name was Kashmir. That's his first name, Kashmir Lenin. Kashmir Lenin. Okay.
And not John Lennon, Joseph Lennon.
Okay. So he unofficially changed his name, and he drove a delivery truck for Silver Cup Bread in Long Island City, in New York City. Now it's become Silver Cup Studios. It's TV studios. But back in the day, they were one of the biggest producers of bread, regular white bread. And he wore on his navy blue work jacket on his left sleeve, so people could see it when he was driving his truck, an American flag. When he went to church on Sunday, he wore a suit and tie and a hat, and he wore a pin, American flag pin. And this is what I saw go through many of my. I could go on and on about this, but you get the idea. A little bit of irony here. When he passed away many years ago, he was living in New Jersey, and they had his actual name. You go to a funeral parlor for a wake. You go in the lobby, and usually there's somebody there who works there, to direct you, especially if there's more than one wake going on, which there was. With 3 or 4 wakes going on that weekend. And we go in, and I see people coming in and asking questions and looking puzzled and almost ready to walk out, because my uncle had his real name posted.
Right.
And he didn't go by that. He went by another name. So people who knew him for the past 20 years of his life, when he, from his 60s to his 80s, when he was retired, they thought they came to the wrong funeral parlor. So that was the irony of that. But that's the atmosphere that I grew up in, and I didn't see any job prospects for myself. And when I talked with my uncles, many of them were World War II veterans, and one of them was a Korean War vet. They were my go-to people. I grew up without a father, as you know, and they were horrified that I was considering going to go in the Marine Corps. Horrified. And they set my young butt down and tried to convince me not to do that. And I listened to them. I didn't interrupt them. I listened to them at length. And I said to them, what do you think my future is going to be living here, staying here? Even though there's a loving family, I don't see any prospects for me, for my future. And I kind of want to prove to myself that I can do this. And when they heard I wanted to go into the Marine Corps, they were like, you're not going to make it. You know, you're not that kind of personality, that type of character that you're not going to make it through boot camp. And that really hit me hard. I went and I used to go to talk to the recruiters twice a week. They were realistic and very encouraging. And they told me how to train physically to get ready for this. And told me this will be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. And when I look back, it probably ranks as one of the toughest things I've ever done. Now, it's not all about push-ups and doing 5-mile runs and, you know, shooting rifles and so forth.
Right.
They psychologically, they break you down. They beat you up verbally and psychologically. And the point was to break you down, to build you up. You're no longer an individual. You're part of a unit. You're part of a unit that looks, acts, thinks together as one. You're part of a team. And my uncles didn't want me to do it. My mother didn't want me to do it. And finally, I went to the recruiter and I told him, I said, this is what I want to do, but my family's totally against it. So he said to me, do you think it would help if I talked to them? I said, yeah. I says, look, you're a Vietnam vet. You're a gunnery sergeant. You got like 14, 15 years in. My uncles are veterans from World War II. I says, could you talk to them on my behalf? They came to the house, to my mother's apartment. All my uncles were there with my mother. And the recruiter said to me, you need to leave the house. And I left for like over an hour. And then I sat outside. And he came down afterwards. And he said, I think I spoke on your behalf, thinking about your future, what you really want to do. And he says, they're gonna give you their blessing. I needed my mother to sign the papers because I wanted to be sworn in at 17. I think at the time was the only service that allowed a 17-year-old to go be sworn in, with the promise that I would finish and graduate high school. But she had to sign the papers, and she did. And
Changed your life.
It did. Now I'm nowhere in the shape I was back then, but it shaped my character and my personality for the rest of my life. You know, it gave me a moral compass. It reinforced my patriotism. It gave me a sense of service, of being part of a team, being part of something bigger than yourself, and being grateful for that. And it's not about putting money in your pocket. It's about doing the right thing for people who maybe are too weak to defend themselves or protect themselves. And that stayed with me the rest of my life.
Talking with retired NYPD Bomb Squad Detective Don Sadowy here on the Mike the New Haven podcast. We are live here on YouTube, and you can find us in every audio platform as well as on YouTube, audio, MC''S, audio. So, you know, I imagine then going through the Marine Corps, I mean, you must have, we'll talk about the police academy and the NYPD years a little bit later, but compared to the Marine Corps, the police academy must have been a walk in the park.
It was. I was still in top physical shape. I will be very honest. I found, you know, I never got encouragement to go to college. And that's not because of me. They didn't have the wherewithal, you know. They were kind of stuck in that time warp from the 1950s, you know. You went, you got a job, you got married, you had kids, you know, and listen, you could get a job in a factory down on the waterfront, you know, and, you know, as a young guy, you know, you live for the weekend, you go to the bar, you know, cheer on your favorite sports team, you know, and, you know, date some of the local girls and stuff like that, hang out with your buddies, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And I
The bachelor's life.
I wanted more than that. I wanted more than that.
So, before we continue on with your Marines tenure, this is again, I talked earlier about old New York in regards to the bookies and whatnot. This is just not just old New York, but this is old society. You don't really see stories like this anymore. And that's the story of you and your wife. Because, like I said, it's old school. It's just, for lack of a better way to put it, it's just a very cute story. You guys have known each other for a while, growing up together around each other. You ran the same circles and then began dating, to which 3 days after the first date, you proposed. You had talked a lot about, you guys had talked to each other a ton over the course of those 3 days. So, you got a better sense of what she was about, and she got a better sense of what what you were about. But nonetheless, 3 days, if the Marine Corps scared your mom, imagine this, this news. So anyway, that being said, you mentioned feeling a sense of urgency in your book. So over the course of conversing with her, I should say, when was the moment you knew, this is the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with?
We had known each other as friends for many years. Since I think we were like 12 years old. We were in the same circle of neighborhood kids. And, at that time, it's very awkward, for boys and girls. Girls mature faster than boys.
Yes.
Looking back. We didn't date each other, but we were just friends. Just friends. And over a period of time, not just her, but, other boys and girls, you get to know each other. You get a kind of a sense of, where people's heads are at, The group I hung out with, we weren't into smoking pot. We weren't into getting blind ass, staggering drunk on a Friday night, which you got it. Somebody's older brother would go buy liquor or something. We weren't into that. We weren't into that. There was a local priest, an Episcopal priest, who thought that it wasn't good for us to hang out on street corners. So he would invite us, over to the church, and he would let us watch TV. He knew some of the kids in the group didn't have a very, trying to find the right word here, stable family life at home. And he knew some of the kids were hungry. So he got some of the monks that used to come over to the church with him through whatever aspects of things. And they used to make on Friday night big pots of spaghetti and meatballs and Italian bread and soda. And, I never thought about it back then, but that was like really kind of them reaching out to the neighborhood kids. And then we watched TV. Saturday night, he would think of a movie that was coming out, and sometimes controversial. Not now, but at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, I remember this. There was a movie called Easy Rider with Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson and a bunch of other people who became very famous. And it was about these guys on motorcycles transporting drugs and their experiences. And he got us to go to the movie with him, a whole bunch of us, on like Saturday night, local neighborhood theater. And then the next day, he'd invite us, after church. And you didn't have to be the same denomination. And that was radical at the time, because it sounds funny to say this, but Catholic kids didn't hang out with a Protestant priest.
Sounds like Ireland.
Yeah.
Troubles.
And to say that to your parents, forget about it. Anyway, he would have us hang out with him and say, "What do you think of that movie?" And he wasn't trying to guide the conversation. He wanted us to talk about it. What do you think was good? What do you think wasn't good in that? And he got us to think for ourselves. And that was really good. And Kathy was there with me during a lot of that, along with other boys and girls. when I came home on leave, I was gone for 2 years from when I first went in. So when I came home, I was getting ready to be shipped overseas to the 3rd Marine Division.
Mhm.
Things were still popping, not open war, but things were still unstable in Southeast Asia. And I will tell you, I was a bit frightened, but I knew I would do my duty. But I was going to ship out for 13 months. Now there's nothing like, the only way to communicate back then was to write a letter. And depending where you were, what unit, what ship you were on, where you were being constantly moved around in the Pacific, it took about 14 to maybe 20 days for Kathy to get a letter from me, and vice versa. You know, we didn't have all the technology we have today.
Right.
And you were gone for 13 months. I was living on sea rations, which is like non-perishable food in a box less than the size of a shoebox. Then I was okay with it. But I knew it should be okay, but there's a chance I could be going into harm's way. And there was a sense of urgency. And I told her how I felt. And one of the things I really loved about her was it wasn't any of these attitudes and mind games. You know, I got to figure out how you're feeling, why you're feeling. No, there was none of that. Everything was just up in front. She told me how she felt, what she thought, what she wanted in life, what she was hoping for. And we were on the same page. We really were. And I fell in love with her. And I said, look, and I said what I said. And I said, let's see if we still feel the same way after I come home after 13 months. Because a lot of girls would not wait 13 months. There was other girls that I knew, and they used to say, oh, I would never wait for somebody for a couple of years, because I was in for 4 years, and I didn't know how it would work out. But when I came home, I was afraid she didn't feel the same way. She was afraid I felt that way too, and we didn't. And her father was former Marine, and it all kind of came together. And we're still together after all these years.
Exactly. So the rest, as they say, is history. A quick nod to the live chat again. Briefly stopping by was Bill Cannon, retired NYPD homicide sergeant Bill Cannon of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, which is the podcast I mentioned to you off the air before.
I got to give him a call.
Yeah. Sergeant Cannon, if you're still watching, you'll get a call from Detective Sadowy soon, and you will not regret talking with him. Believe me. So, you returned, and she was willing to wait. And then, of course, then came the few years that you were working at the UN. And how you got the UN job is pretty interesting, because the city was going through a fiscal crisis in the mid 1970s. So you took the NYPD test in 77, but you didn't get called until 80, which we'll discuss momentarily. But you're literally walking down the street. A couple of guys working security at the front door of the UN. And correct me if I'm not telling the story all the way.
You're on track.
So they see your posture, because if you ever seen anybody that was in the military, they walk a certain way. They're very well trained, especially those in the Marine Corps, and so there's a certain posture to them that they're taught to carry themselves with. These guys notice you walking like a Marine, so they literally say, "Hey, come over here," and from there you end up getting a job guarding a man that at the time was the UN Secretary General, only the fourth in the UN's history, and would later be the future president of Austria, a gentleman by the name of Kurt Waldheim. So take me through, first, before we talk about your relationship with Mr. Waldheim, getting that job.
This is going to sound really corny, but I think I'm not a holy roller, but I believe in God. I have very strong faith. especially after a number of things that have happened to me in my life. I've always felt blessed that God was kind of looking out for me. And it was a beautiful day out, sunny day, brisk, kind of breezy. I had gone down to Federal Plaza to file for taking the exam for U.S. Border Patrol. Now, if you recall, from 1975, I got out of the Corps in 76. From 1975 to 1980, major layoffs. First time in the history of New York City. The economy was tanked, as it does periodically.
Yes.
There was no jobs, nowhere, no how, with a future. I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps, and I remember somebody telling me that they were going to look to hire guys for the U.S. Border Patrol, but you got to file for the test. You got to take a test. You got to get on the list, and you got to go through that litany process. So I went down to 26 Federal Plaza back then, and I filed for the test, and I took the subway halfway back up the east side, and I decided it was such a beautiful day. I'm getting off the subway, and I'm going to walk up the east side of Manhattan. It's, I'm right out of the Marine Corps, and just kind of thrilled to be back home again, taking the sights in. It's a beautiful day. And I'm walking, taking a full 36-inch step. I still got a high and tight haircut. I got no waist, and here I am marching up First Avenue. And I'm walking by the UN, and it's an impressive compound. It's 16 and a half acres, 3.5 levels below ground. It's impressive. And these uniform officers that were there called me over, and we struck up a conversation. And I didn't know poop from pound cake. Keeping it clean, Mike.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I don't have to edit anything out.
And they said, go across the street. We're looking. We like to get former military guys, for UN security. And I said, wow. I says, that's an idea, because now I'm thinking, if I get the job, the Border Patrol, I'm going to be going down to some little border town, probably just bringing my wife down there. And it's not the best of circumstances, starting out a marriage like that. And then I find out the pay was significantly more, and that they had a pension plan and benefits and everything. So I go across the street to the UN. They call it the UNDC building. It's a big green tinted building right across the street. And they have a recruiting office there up on the 3rd floor. And I go up, and it's maybe 10:30 in the morning. And I go up there, and there's hardly anybody there. And this gentleman dressed to the tens in a beautiful suit sees me, and he's coming out to get a cup of coffee. And I'm in the waiting room, and again, I don't know who to see, who to talk to. And he sees me sitting there, and I guess I looked puzzled. And he said in his very heavy French accent, and his name was Mr. Dusson, and he's French Canadian. And he said to me, young man, may I help you? I said, yeah. I says, I'm right out of the service. I talked to some guys across the street, and they sent me over here, and I wanted to find out about getting an application and maybe getting an interview to come into UN security. And I was dressed very neatly. I mean, I used to iron my dungarees. They had a crease in them. My shirt was pressed. I wore a nice kind of jacket, sport jacket, highly shined shoes. But I was dressed very casual. And he said to me, he says, they're very formal here. He says, hold on. He says, I'll get you an application. He says, but I'll be very honest with you. you really need to come back for an interview, but you need to be wearing a suit and tie. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Obviously I don't know these things. I'm not even.
You do.
Yeah. So he gives me the application, and he wishes me well. And I think that was the last time he thought he'd see me. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I come walking back up there in my Sunday best, in a conservative suit and tie, highly shined shoes, with the application completely filled out. And I don't see him. I see some receptionist and then somebody's secretary, and they take the application and they said, hold on, stay here for a little bit. We'll bring this to somebody. And about 20 minutes later, the lady comes out and says, Mr. Sadowy, she says, would you be agreeable to being interviewed right now for this application? I says, absolutely. So I'm brought into this grand office. It really was grand. And the person that's going to interview me has my application. He was reading it. And he turns around in the chair when his secretary brings me in. It's this Frenchman, French-Canadian, Mr. Toussaint. He says, I have to tell you, I didn't think I'd see you again. He says, but I'm
At least he was honest.
I'm sorry?
At least he was honest.
Yeah. He says, but I'm very impressed that you took my words so seriously and you come back the same day in a suit and tie. You must really want this job. I said, I really do. I really do. And the rest was history. I went into it and I was trained. I worked around the clock. I worked within the compound. I worked outside of the compound. I did all kind of assignments. It was, I think, when I look back, one of the more interesting times in my life, because it opened my eyes to what was happening in the world, which was very turbulent at that time. 1977 and 1980. It was just one thing after another. I got to be within arm's reach of people who were heads of state, foreign ministers, dictators, presidents. More importantly, I got to kind of be like a fly on a wall to history, to hear what real negotiations go on. When the cameras go on in the Security Council, in the floor of the Security Council or the General Assembly, I would call it almost theater, because they're playing to the folks back home. Everything that they say, their gestures, their mannerisms, that's all political. That's going to play for back home. The real negotiations happen in the corridors and the Diplomats North Lounge, which overlooks this beautiful, huge garden outside with huge picture windows. And all negotiations started over a glass of scotch with everybody, Back then, diplomats were big drinkers, and they would sit in these big, low slung leather chairs with low tables in these lounges. And that's where a lot of the real diplomacy was carried out. It wasn't what we saw on television, in the evening news, conflict in the Middle East. General Assembly calls the Security Council into negotiations. Yeah, but the real stuff was done outside of the chamber, which I made note of in the book with a couple of meetings and so forth. It opened my eyes to the world. Coming out of 4 years in the Marine Corps, and again, I was a shy kid coming out of high school.
Right.
the world was black and white. When you're a Marine, the world is black and white. And maybe that's how it should be for a Marine, because you're going to be called, you may be called upon to do some really extenuating things. And you got to be there for each other. So I understand that. But when I got to the UN, I realized the world's not in black and white. One of the things that I learned after I was there for a while, I'm a curious person by nature.
As am I.
And I was told in the cafeteria, everybody goes to the cafeteria. Not everybody goes to eat lunch at the delegates' dining room, which, by the way, is the same food, except it's a lot fancier and a lot more expensive. Okay. And there's a bar. There's a bar up there. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So of course, I'm saving my money. I want to get married. I wasn't married at the time, and saving my money, me and Kathy. And I remember some people whispering to me, like, I got my tray of food. It's a big, beautiful cafeteria. And there's like picture windows that look out over the East River, that look south, nice views.
Right.
Oh, Don, don't go over and sit at those tables. Why not? Oh, the Russians are there. You don't want to sit at those tables. Me being me, by the time
Mikhail Gorbachev, how do you do?
before I got out of the Marine Corps, I was my own man.
Right.
I had formed my personality and my character, and I was secure in that, as I have been most of my life. But the foundation was the Marine Corps. I walk square in front of God and everybody. I take my tray, I walk right over to the middle of these two long tables, and I ask if I could sit down politely. And these Russians, like, who are you? I said, and I sat down. I didn't wait to be invited. I sat down right in the thick of them, in front of God and everybody. Mm. And I introduced myself. What are you doing here? Well, why are you sitting here with us? Very, very cut and dry, very gruff. I says, well, I thought I would come over and ask if I can break bread with you folks, because I was told not to. What? I said, yeah, people told me not to sit here because you guys are Russians. You're Russian diplomats. And they started jabbering in Russian. And I said, the reason I wanted to come over, I says, I'm curious. I'm curious about you. I'm an American, obviously. I said, I watch the television and read the papers. And I said, they paint you all as bad people. Oh, it was like sticking them in a butt with a pin. What? And I said, I would like to get to meet you and ask you about your country, your culture, if that's all right. If not, I'll pick up my tray and I'll leave. They started jabbering in Russian. And this woman, I'm going to say in her late 50s, Russian woman, blonde, with short hair. She said, no, please stay. Please stay. She says, and this opened up a dialogue about the people of Russia, about us here in the United States. And I says, I realize I'm being spoon-fed whatever the producers of a particular radio station or a TV station or the newspapers, what spin they want to put on things. So I would like to hear from you. She introduced me to like everybody. And when I worked 4 to 12, she was the head of the Russian typing pool. Her husband was third secretary to the Russian ambassador to the UN. And when she worked 4 to 12, we would sit and have dinner together and just chat. And it wasn't like anybody was trying to recruit me or anything like that. I came in just very naive and honest, and she picked up on it and introduced me to a lot of people. I made friends with as many people as I could. I made friends with the Muslims from the Middle East. I made friends from Africa. To this day, I'm still in contact with some of my African friends who were retired.
Mm-hmm.
There's a funny story, I'm not going to say it, about learning some phrases, some African phrases. So I don't want to give that away.
Yeah.
That's but
fine.
It actually, that story followed me when I went into the NYPD, which you know, but don't give that away.
No, I won't.
A little teaser for anybody who's considering buying my book. I decided that I live locally, but I think globally. And it really opened my mind to thinking about world politics. Then when I became a bodyguard to the Secretary General at the time, I was in his residence as he was having private meetings with people, or in his outer office. And I mean, we're talking about major events that were going on in the world. So I kind of describe myself, I think I mentioned it in the book, I felt like a fly on a wall to history. I'm in the room with these leaders and representatives, and I'm overhearing private conversations. By the way, I had to swear to and sign a very long document in triplicate that I would not reveal the conversations that I was privy to during my time of service at the UN. It was a legal document, very similar to like if you have a government clearance today with the U.S. government, that you won't reveal anything that you learned. You
take it to your grave, basically.
I'm sorry.
You take it to your grave, basically.
Well, not quite. When you're retired or you move on, some of the things I talk about in my book, as you know, I had 3 government clearances with 3 agencies. Mm-hmm. I had to go to those agencies to ask permission if I could discuss certain things. Certain things I couldn't. So we had to change the manuscript up a couple of times. And Jeff Ingber, God bless him, he's great. Yes. I'll tell you, that was another time I really feel blessed by God. I didn't actually meet him. A gentleman named Joe Connor wanted to do a book about the murder of his father called Shattered Lives. It's about the FALN bombing, William Morales bombing Francis Tavern, which is a very historical place where George Washington said goodbye to his troops. They contacted a gentleman named Rick Hahn, who was an FBI agent, and then he was my group supervisor. And I will tell you, I had my confrontations with the FBI. Many people do. But that aside, Rick Hahn, we became very close. Sometimes you meet somebody professionally and yeah, you work together, but your personalities click. And that's what happened with us. So now, decades later, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're all retired, and he gives me a call. Hey, Don, what are you doing? Hey, I'm retired. I'm just taking care of some afflictions that I have, and just dealing with life, spending some time finally with my family. And listen, this guy approached me, and we're pulling a team together to do research for a book. And I never did anything like that. And I really enjoyed it. It was like working with former investigators that you work with. And it was kind of like working a cold case is the best way I can explain it. But Jeff Ingber, I can't say enough good things about this man. And he's interesting in his own right. So I'm sorry, I kind of got off track there.
Don, like I told you before, whichever guest comes on the show, they drive the car. So whatever avenue you want to travel down, if you want to jump centuries ahead, decades ahead, I don't care.
No. I want to stay on track with your
Well, I
question.
appreciate that, but I don't mind. We're not strict here. So I do want to ask you about this Kurt Waldheim. And before I get into Kurt Waldheim, just a quick note for those of you that don't know who the FALN is. They were, and I can say this because I'm half Puerto Rican in addition to being half Dominican Rican. They were a terrorist group from Puerto Rico. Their FALN stands for Fuerzas Armadas para la Liberación Nacional de Puerto Rico. I think something like that.
I got to interrupt you. That was very good with no accent.
Thank you.
I'm teasing.
I know. I caught the drift there. It
was very good.
Thank you. My Spanish is.
I would have butchered that.
My Spanish has come a long way. I learned. I had to relearn it. I spoke it when I was a baby. When I was a toddler, I spoke. That was the only language I spoke. I lost it. Got it back when I was 7, 8 years old. So it's about 75% of the way back.
I got to interrupt you for a second.
Please do.
This just rang a bell for me. Remember I was telling you about the McCarthy Era?
Yes.
When I was really young, my grandparents started teaching me other languages from Europe, where they grew up. And there was a big argument in the family when I started school, because I started picking that up. And that's the best time to pick up a language, is when you're young, as you know. I got reamed out by my mother and a couple of other relatives arguing with my grandparents. My mother never argued with my grandparents. It was just, you don't do that. He said, you have to stop this. Again, I'm going back to the McCarthy Era. How's he going to get a good job? Who's going to hire him if he speaks the language? They hate us. Nobody wants to give anybody any help if they think you're from Eastern Europe or Central Europe at that time. And if you speak the language, never mind an accent, this kid will never get ahead. That put the kibosh on me learning any of the languages from my grandparents, which I kind of regret to this day, but I understand why.
It was a product of the time. And I same thing with, for me here, my late great grandmother, she's been gone about a decade now. She lived a long life though. She was 83. Miss her a lot, but she, the reason she could understand English, and but she could not answer you back in it. Right. And she'd been here a long time. So the reason I wanted to learn Spanish, ironically enough, one of the main reasons at least, was because I wanted to communicate with her better. Because I spoke Spanglish, it was broken Spanish for me and her broken English, and we made it work. But that's the reason why I was able to get it. And it's somebody has a great joke. My buddy Mark DeMeo, who's been on this podcast before, and I mentioned him earlier. He's half Dominican, half Czech. Now there's a mix, and he says, I know enough Spanish to pick up a date. So, in that sense, it works. It's a good line. He's a comedian, so he can come up with those great lines. Shout out to Mark if you're watching, pal. But I do want to.
That's great.
It is. So that I clarified, like I said, who the FALN was, and they conducted numerous bombings throughout New York in the 70s and 80s, including one that we'll talk about a little later. Gravely injured, and nearly killed 3 police officers in New York, including 2 members of the bomb squad. So you worked with Kurt Waldheim, guarding him for a few years. And Kurt Waldheim, in history, he passed away in 2007 at the age of 89. He is a very controversial figure, to say the least. There's a lot of different stories, either way, positive and negative, about Kurt Waldheim. I mentioned he was a Secretary General of the UN. He went on to be president of Austria from 1986 to 1992, I believe. Yeah. And he had some links to the war crimes that were being committed by the Nazis in Germany. At the very minimum, I'm not accusing him of partaking. I don't know. I don't want to accuse somebody when they're not allowed to defend themselves. But at the very minimum, it was said that he at least had knowledge of these horrible things that were taking place. But nonetheless, you didn't know any of that, and you worked with him, guarding him for 3 years. I mean, I don't know how else to ask this question. Take me through what your relationship was like with him, because there's so many layers there.
I'm not going to give it away. because I think.
All right, yeah, that's fine.
No. Let me just preface what I'm going to say. There's an interesting interview on me becoming a member of his bodyguard detail, his personal detail, and to work not only with him at the UN, but outside of the UN, at the residence, and it entailed a lot. And he didn't conduct the interview. The person who ran everything behind the scenes, no, he conducted everything at the UN.
Right.
Okay. He was like considered the rank of like a head of state. Mm-hmm. So he ran the administration with that. But everything at home, everything socially, was administered by his wife. So I was selected and asked, would I be interested in being part of the detail? I didn't initially say, hey, boss, I want to be in the bodyguard detail. No, it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way.
Right.
I was discreetly asked, would I want to consider being part of that detail? And there was a good friend of mine who got into the detail before me, Nick Panzerino, who was in the book. And he's got some interesting comments about Waldheim and his family, which I'm not going to give that away. But the interview was extremely interesting. So I'm going to leave that as a teaser. Okay. Working for him, he was very much a formal person, except when he was home. When he got home, he'd take his jacket off, loosen his tie, sit down and talk. There were times he talked with us. He treated all of us very, very well. Never spoke down to us in any way. Would ask us about our families and so forth, which I thought was interesting. But his wife basically ran the show at home, everything off duty, vacations, things like that. Again, it was one of the most interesting times of my life, and all the movers and shakers and diplomats and people would come for dinner, and then they'd go upstairs to the library, and they'd have coffee, and they would talk. And where's Sadowy? I'm just outside of the room in the hallway. I'm not there to eavesdrop. I'm there for security purposes. Why would I say that? You had people that would come there that were armed, and that was frowned upon. The only person who was allowed, that Kurt Waldheim allowed to be armed, because the guy, and rightfully so, was very worried about his own personal safety, was Yasser Arafat. Yeah, Yasser Arafat carried a Browning high-power 9mm pistol underneath his jacket in a holster. And he wouldn't give that up to nobody, not even the U.S. State Department. That wasn't happening. So, there were reasons. I would
of course.
Issue. Now, this is just my opinion, okay? And you may speak to Jeff about this. And again, one of the things I learned in the UN is that we can agree to disagree. We could break bread together. We can socialize together. You may be on the opposite end of things that I believe, but I respect you for it. And that was one of the most important things that I learned working at the UN in 3.5 years. We could be on opposite sides of the fence. I made friends with dozens of people. And no, we didn't agree on everything. We did not. But we were polite about it. I learned from being in a diplomatic environment, You don't have to act like you're the smartest man in the room and pound your fist to get your point across. You could speak softly, and you'll make your point. They'll make their counterpoint. But at the end of it, we could still be friends.
Right.
So that's a big thing that I took away. So with that said, if you speak to Jeff Inger, I'm sure he's going to disagree with my opinion with this. But we went back and forth on this.
Mm.
I've always been of the mindset that if we're going to talk about condemning somebody, now I don't mean condemning them to death, but that we think that they're
not the best person,
that they're bad guys.
Yeah, right.
That's how I'll politely phrase it.
Mm.
I said, now maybe I'm a bit naive, but I go back to my training as a detective.
Right.
If you're going to tell me this person committed war crimes, and that's what it really come down to. You're telling me this person committed war crimes. Show me the proof. Show me the proof. Now, I know I'm going to sound slighted in this, but what I fall back on is my military training, as well as being a detective. In the military, if I was overseas and my squad was ambushed, and one of my Marines, I was a corporal overseas. When I came back to the States, I was promoted to the rank of sergeant. I was the assistant platoon sergeant when I came back. But overseas, I was a corporal in charge of a squad. If one of my men was murdered, purposely murdered, whatever you want to call him, partisan, communist, whatever, and I'm overseas with my squad, and I had said this, I don't care. You kill one of my men, I will make it my life's mission to hunt down the men who did it. That's my position. Now, I know people will not agree with that, but you got to know where I'm coming from.
Your background.
Okay?
It's an intense background.
Very intense. And there's not room for discussion and the niceties of life.
No, as you said earlier, it's black and white.
The world was black and white.
Right.
Okay. Now I'm looking at Kurt Waldheim's background, being told about it. And again, maybe I sound naive. I don't mean to be. But I consider myself a very fair person. I think if you were on trial for a serious crime, you would want me as one of your jurors. Not because I was law enforcement or military, but I'm going to be as fair as I can be. You're going to have to prove to me how guilty this person is. Okay? So with that said, please show me the proof. Well, Don, he was a war criminal. He was this, he was a Nazi, he was this, he was that. I don't like, a lot of young people look at somebody in history from hundreds of years ago and condemn them today and want to tear statues down because of the way the world was back then. I'm a realist, okay? The way the world was, and I'm not defending anything about being, the Nazi regime or anything.
Of course not.
He was drafted into the army. He was Austrian. He was studying in college. He became a second lieutenant. he was put on the headquarters detail in Eastern Europe for tracking down partisans who were killing German soldiers. Now, I know everybody's got their own opinion with this, but I'm approaching this through the eyes of a soldier or a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not condoning killings at all, but I'm saying go back in time to the way the world was then. Your country was absorbed into Germany before the war. Now you're drafted. You were in college. Back then, I guess that was following orders, which you had to do. You didn't have a choice to protest like college kids do here. They put you against the wall and shoot you. Okay? This is how I'm looking at it. Going back to those times.
Yeah.
Now you're a college guy. You're a second lieutenant in the Army. You're sent to where you're sent. You're an intelligence officer on movements of the partisans who were killing German soldiers. Right or wrong, that's how I look at it. I try to dissect things. One of the biggest things I see with people, and sometimes they get into big arguments with me, which I don't like confrontation.
Neither do I.
But you got to look at things realistically, not emotionally. Okay? Again, show me where he pulled out his revolver and he shot somebody. Or he went out in the field and commanded a platoon or a squad of men and executed people. Show me the proof.
I have a saying that
we got into a thing back and forth with me and Jeff,
mm-hmm.
to where he sent me articles and things, and I respect that. But again, show me the proof where he ordered people to be murdered. Okay? Innocent people to be murdered.
Mm.
He was an intelligence officer, a second lieutenant. That's like on the very bottom of the pecking order in the military. Staff NCOs have more respect, get more respect than a second lieutenant does in the Army. And that's a fact. Most people don't realize that because of experience and knowledge. You could say he was a Nazi, member of the Nazi Party. George Patton, at the end of the war, described local people in Germany. He got jammed up for this one, amongst other things. He compared people belonging to the Nazi Party, and it's, back in the day, to being a Democrat in the United States. You're part of the political party. Now, I know it's apples and oranges. Okay?
Yeah. I think it's apples and pears.
Okay. And I know people won't agree with this, I'm sure. But I've always been a fair-minded person.
Yeah.
Show me the proof. Well, he had to know this and he had to know that. I really believe in my heart, a lot of people did know what was going on. But I think that they covered up a lot of stuff because they didn't want a lot of people to know what was going on. And the Holocaust, it just almost unimaginable horror that took place. And I agree with that. But we're talking about one man who was drafted into the Army. He was sent to Eastern Europe. He was on some German general staff who himself was executed for war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
After the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
I think 1947, he was executed. If there was proof, actual proof, individually, that Kurt Waldheim personally supervised and ordered executions, I think he would have been in Nuremberg or he would have been in one of those trials.
I think with everything, context is key. And the context, I think, in general, just doesn't get evaluated nowadays. Because I don't know. I could read any article under the sun about something like this. And we're talking with Don Sadowy here in the Mike and Newhaven podcast, Tales from the Boom Room, part 2, volume 1. I wouldn't know. I mean, it's kind of like you see in the science fiction movies. They're able to take a time machine back to those moments. We're not able to do that. So it's just, it's secondhand. And you're really, especially as a college student, it's hard to believe that it's a year and change now since I graduated. I had great teachers, don't get me wrong. But you're at the mercy of a professor. And not only that, you're at the mercy of a professor's personal interpretation of events, which then spreads to the student. And therefore, the student absorbs that, and that becomes their mindset. And it's a herd mentality nowadays.
I absolutely agree with you on this. Now, depending on who your professor is or what newspapers you read, they put their spin on the facts.
Yeah. And
again, I said to my wife, I always considered myself a reasonable man. I was on 3 juries. I actually made it into the jury box for 3 different trials. Years ago, they wouldn't take you if you were, retired law enforcement. This one trial I was on was a criminal trial, was an active New York City police captain and a female FBI agent who was active. And here I was, retired detective. And the defense counsel, after, you go through this questioning process, if you're going to be in a jury. And it's a bit lengthy. And the defense counsel kept all 3 of us. Now, this was a very experienced defense attorney. The end result was that we found the person not guilty. Now, the other people in the jury room, there was almost some heated discussion. He's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. Okay. That is hearsay and innuendo.
Right.
This is coming from the prosecutor. And we sent notes out several times. I won't get into the details of
specifics, but
we wanted to know, tell us this, tell us that, tell us this. And the prosecutor didn't have it. What happened was the prosecution didn't do their homework with the police. And we felt, okay, you say that this person committed this crime. Prove it to me. Show me the facts, and I'll weigh the facts. And we found the person at the end of the trial not guilty. And the 3 people who were leading the conversation, but we listened to everybody in that jury room, we were the 3 that felt this person's not guilty. And the rest of the jury was like, how could you say that? Oh, this, that, this, that. I said, you're looking at this emotionally. Show me the facts. I'm a reasonable man. I'm an experienced investigator. Show me the facts that prove beyond a shadow of doubt. Well, it didn't even come close to that. Didn't even come close to that. At the end of this trial, when he was found not guilty, this young man, he broke down in real tears, crying hysterically. His attorney grabs us outside. And we said to him, why did you pick the 3 of us to stay? He said, I defended numerous people in 34 years, most of them guilty. He says, I really felt that this guy was telling me the truth and he's not guilty. He says, I needed clear-headed people, not to act with emotion, but to find the facts. Right. Said, that's why I kept the 3 of you on this jury. Wow. So just a little story I share. I always considered myself, I told my wife, I'm a reasonable man. You talk to me about something, we'll talk. But anyway, this is where and I don't mean to make more of it than it is, but this is I think one of the only times in working on the manuscript for this book that me and Jeff differed greatly, and I respect him for that. I do.
Right.
But I just have my own feelings on it. But and he sent me many things to read, which condemned him. Okay, Listen, you didn't have a choice a lot of times.
Yeah.
Back then in the world, and I'll give the benefit of the doubt. But the bottom line is, if you tell me that this guy is a war criminal, show me the proof. Show me an article that was personally witnessed by anybody to say he ordered or he personally carried out a murder of innocent people. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it. And I read a lot. I read quite a bit. And yeah, I was, I guess, young, a bit naive back at that time in my life. I just came out of the service. The world was black and white. I'm working at the UN, and things are just revealing, about things. And I'm not going to give the story up.
No, don't. Yeah, I don't want you to spoil it.
UN, point in the UN, where I call it politics makes strange bedfellows.
It does. Between
Kurt Waldheim and somebody else who was a head of state for a ceremony. And I said to myself, I can't believe I'm standing here knowing what I know. So that's a bit of a teaser for the book. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, the book is, who is it? Well, you'll have to find out if you buy Rendered Safe, Tales of an NYPD Bomb Tech. And I have a disclaimer that just came here from my attorneys. It says the opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect. I'm just kidding. But that was a very fascinating deep dive into that time.
I try to be very honest for you.
No, and I appreciate that. And you can get a deeper dive if you read the book as well.
I want to point something out that we had talked prior to this about things, and I want to make it clear that I was not given a list of any of the questions you were going to ask me.
This is all spontaneous.
And I wanted it to be, and I want to be as honest as I can with you, on these things. I'm not a pro-Nazi or anything like that, but just again, I consider myself to be a fair and open-minded person. Now, I know Jeff feels different on this, but listen, again, the thing I learned working at the UN, we could agree to disagree and still be friends.
Right.
But I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed that I met Jeff Engber. I mean, I can't say enough good things about this guy. I had these stories rolling around in my head for years, and a very good friend of mine, Bernard Johnson from the State Department, who was my sponsor for my clearances and sent me around the world, he said to me, Donnie, he says, you got to sit your butt down and you got to start writing these stories down, because as you get older, you may start forgetting them. And he said, these stories need to be told. And I've actually had somebody who was a retired principal, with a background totally opposite of mine, one day at breakfast in the diner, and he said he purchased my book, and he sat there and he sat back and he looked me in the eye and he says, Don, he says, come on, tell the truth. A lot of these stories are made up, aren't they? And I was flabbergasted. I says, I guess you really don't know who I am, but that's okay. But none of these stories are made up. Now, just to qualify that, Jeff Engber said to me during the 2.5 years we worked part-time on this, it was really a big undertaking to do this. I had no idea, what it took to actually do a book like this. Said to me, I never thought that you were lying, telling me about the stories, but some of them sounded so fantastic. I needed to talk to people who were with you there during that time.
Just to confirm.
Which we did, and confirmed all the stories.
So I do want to accelerate now to finally October of 1980, which is when you got to the New York City Police Department. Now we transition into your NYPD years. This is in the midst of really, I mean, New York of the 70s and 80s is immortalized often through film. Like if you ever seen Mean Streets, you get a glimpse of what 70s New York was like. Obviously, Taxi Driver, Serpico, the list goes on of films that came out during that time. New York's in a bad spot crime-wise. The regression is serious. And here you are coming into the NYPD during this time. Obviously very not your average rookie, obviously given your work prior with the UN and of course in the Marine Corps. But your first command upon graduating from the police academy, I believe, was the 76th precinct in Brooklyn. And so you were around some really great, resourceful, smart cops, which you talked about in the book during that time. And don't spoil it, obviously, but I guess those early years. I can't ask you one specific question about that because so much happened way before you got to the bomb squad. So just those 5 years. I guess what I want you to do is take me through, without spoiling stuff, the cops that helped you along the way,
Sure.
and the funny interactions you had along the way, of which there were plenty of, and of course the close calls that I think every cop and fireman in New York City has on the job.
Oh, so when I went into the job in 1980, I was not 21 years old with no life experience. I was 27 years old. I had been around the world. I'd served over 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps, 3.5 years with UN security. I learned a lot. I will basically say I came in with a lot more life experience than the average young man or young woman coming.
Right. I would agree.
A difference of 7 years makes kind of a big difference. When I came into the job, looking back, I didn't come in with any aspirations of, oh, I'm gonna make this city a safer place. I'm gonna be the good guy, and I'm gonna do all good things. I mean, basically, yeah, but I didn't have any of this stuff going on in my head. I will say because of my life experience, I was going in with both eyes open.
Right.
I was not the young, naive fellow I once was. Okay. One of the things they don't teach in many places, like police departments, even though it's considered a paramilitary organization, okay, with very strict discipline and rules, very unforgiving. I went in with my eyes open, with no expectations of any sort, really. I came in with my eyes open. I will say what I found. You had asked me, and I'm sorry I didn't answer it more clearly before, about my experience in the police academy. Police academy, the physical aspects of it was a walk in the park. Firearms, no problem. Where I will tell you honestly, where I had difficulty was in the academics, in particular, learning the penal law, and then on top of that, a separate book called the Criminal Procedure Law for New York State. They kind of overlap in certain ways, but yet they don't. And when you're a rookie in the academy, there's no leeway. It's either you know it or you don't. And I found the academic aspect of learning the law. Now, police science, actually, I found very interesting in some of the other, academic classes. But I knew that I had to go for tutoring, which they offered after the end of the day. You went on your own off-duty time, but it was at the academy. And I found a lot of times the rooms were packed with people for going to tutoring. And I'll say that was that was the difficult part for me going through the police academy, was that now I get put into Brooklyn. I get put with some people that you could have done a movie or a TV series about cops and detectives. Super knowledgeable about life on the street and realities and how to deal with it and maneuver through different situations, which impressed me greatly. It really did. I was in awe of some of these cops and detectives. I was very fortunate. Some of them took me under their wing. I was savvy enough to know that you treat these men with great respect, and you don't just walk up and ask stupid questions. You know, you learn what the pecking order is. And I was very fortunate. I'm going to throw some names out.
Please do.
Detective Jimmy Russo. Man was a legend, an absolute legend. He just passed away about 2-3 years ago. If you ever worked in Brooklyn with guys who worked in Brooklyn, you throw that name out, and the first thing that happens is a big smile on their face and says, "Oh, geez, you know Jimmy." And there's a story in there in particular, which I'm not going to tell the end of it. Jimmy had me and another young Irish rookie. We were just in the area, and there was going to be a major riot between two Hasidim organizations. Now, prior to this, for those of you who might know, maybe you don't know, there was a attack against a police precinct in Brooklyn by the Hasidim, hundreds and hundreds of them. And they always gave the nickname after that, you know, cops with dark humor. Of course, we have with things named the precinct after that, Fort Surrender. Okay. So these two groups were lined up on the street like two armies ready to do battle. And Jimmy Russo tells us, "We're going there. We'll put it over the air, and we're going to go there." Jimmy said, "Don't touch your baton, your nightstick. Don't keep your hand away from your gun belt and your gun. Keep your hands at your sides and walk right behind me. And don't make eye contact with nobody. And just follow my lead." And I'll tell you, it's, well, you know the story.
Yes. And Bill Ryan in the chat does know it too, you know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is one of the people that helped train me. Now, very quickly, there was some street cops, and I just got off the phone with Jeff Matlin, who was one of these guys. I looked up, I was on the phone with him last week.
Mm-hmm.
He said, anybody, almost anybody, could be a police officer, but it takes someone special to be a good street cop. And he looked like, there's photos of him in my book, him and Larry Riccio. Larry is barrel-chested with a beard, and he's a no-nonsense guy. And Jeff was the collar man. And Jeff looked like a young Tom Selleck at the time. And man, all the girls, if he just gave them a smile, they were like ready to give them their phone number. But what a great guy. And one of the things we reflected on was that they took a liking to me, thinking I was a very quirky young man. Okay. I wonder
why.
in the way that I thought about the world. You know, again, I came into the job with life experience. You know, I wasn't coming in with rose-colored glasses on. I was a realist, but I liked the way that they spoke to people respectfully, no matter who it was. They were very fair. And if somebody got locked up, they were 110% guilty of doing whatever they did to warrant being locked up, you know. And I remember we would show up to different scenes, and either Larry or Jeff would say, "Look, we can handle this way or that way. There's a choice A and there's a choice B. Whatever happens isn't as a result of us coming in like gangbusters. It's a result of your bad decisions. So now you have to make a choice." You know, we didn't come in and just lock people up. We tried to de-escalate things. And that was the thing I was very impressed with. They would try to de-escalate the situation a lot of times. And many times people realize you're going to get locked up. You're going to go to jail. You're going to have this on your record. Do you want that? You know, we would try to explain things to people and said, you know, you got to make good life decisions. You can't be doing this. But then there were people who were career criminals. And they realized too, once they're in custody, that's it. Stop fighting. We're not going to do anything to you. You know, like you see in these cop movies, you know, where guys are pounding on guys who are in handcuffs and stuff.
Yeah.
That was drilled into me in the very beginning of my career. Once they're in custody, they stop fighting. That's it. It's over. Now we process them. One of the things that I felt, and you go through a lot of emotions, seeing a lot of bad things too. The biggest thing is you have to remind yourself not to lose your humanity. Not to lose your humanity. They're kicking me, spitting in my face, hitting me with stuff, not because I'm Donald Sadowy, because I'm wearing that uniform. And for whatever's going on in their head that day, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm there. I'm catching the brunt of it. I've been attacked, unprovoked. I got put in the hospital a few times, nothing life-threatening, where I had to stay home for a few days. I'll be honest, I gave as good as I got. You know, if somebody was trying to hurt me, I had to defend myself. You know, and you're trying to put a hurting on me, I got to put a hurting on you to stop you from doing what you're doing.
You don't want to get hurt. You don't want to die.
I'm sorry?
You don't want to get hurt, and you definitely don't want to die.
No, but it just seemed to go with the territory. So the guys that really inspired me to be the best street cop that I could was Jeff Matlin and Larry Riccio. And a lot of times, if one of them made a collar, now there's an empty seat in the radio car. They go to the sergeant at roll call. Yeah, Sarge, put the kid in the car with me. I'll take him. I'll teach him. You know. So like if Larry was off, I was with Jeff. If Jeff was off, I was with Larry. I want to do another teaser.
Please. More than welcome.
I'm in uniform. I'm on patrol. Now I'm on the east side of Manhattan. It's bitter cold out. It's the winter. It's to the city. It's this huge apartment complex opposite the UN. It's between 1st and 2nd Avenue. It's this huge complex of apartments. And the sergeant gets a call that there's a possible bad smell, possible DOA in an apartment, elderly woman who lives by herself. I get there. Larry and Jeff are there. This was for any members of the service that are watching this. This is before pre-arraignment in Manhattan. That if you lock somebody up, you were with them 24, 36 hours in the system. It was horrible. It was horrible. You got no sleep. You got no rest.
Right.
So I was like maybe 24, 26 hours. Now I'm back to work. I never took off my uniform. I never had anything to eat. I didn't sleep. And I'm a rookie. So the rookies get all the
they pay their dues.
unfavorable little assignments.
So I do want to accelerate ahead. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry,
Go to Tudor City, and it's a DOA. And later on, Larry and Jeff came back to check on me. And I'm going to leave it there to say that's one of the most funniest situations that I could recall that had happened to me when I was in uniform. So, again, just a teaser.
That's fine. And we're talking with Donald Sadowy here in the Mike and Haven podcast, the miniseries Tales from the Boom Room, in which I chronicle members of the arson and explosion as well as bomb squad. So I want to do a quick shout out to the live chat. Keith James is in the live chat. Keith, good to see you, pal. Of course, I mentioned Bill Ryan earlier. Bill Ryan's here watching us. Bill, I appreciate you giving us a view. Of course, Bill was on this podcast and he was great. My sister's here. My older sister's here. So shout out to my older sister who's nice enough to tune in, of course. For an episode I've been looking forward to recording for a long time. And it's been as good as advertised. I'm having a lot of fun talking with Don. Bill Ryan says, Fort Surrender, 66 precincts. I worked there for 6 months in 1985.
He knows exactly what I'm talking about with that story.
Yeah, he does. Bill Ryan, a great
to hear you, Bill. Good to hear you. Hope you're doing well, my friend.
I hope so, too. Shout out to Bill. He's the one that he's part of the reason why you and I are talking. He put me on to you. He recommended you to me, and I said, sure.
I greatly appreciate that. Let me just say here and now, it was always a pleasure working with the men and women from Arson Explosion Squad. They were our sister squad. And my memories of working with Bill, he was the quintessential gentleman. Quintessential gentleman as a detective. Always a pleasure of working with him. Bill, I'm going to give out a quick little story. It's not in the book, but it refers to a story in the book about the 5-letter bombs that were at the UN headquarters
in 1997. Yes.
Now, and we were there round the clock for several days, and the chief of detectives wanted to know, what the heck are my detectives doing at the UN for a couple of days and nights? Nobody briefed them. Like, they knew, but they didn't know.
Is this Chief Ali?
No. This is way before.
Okay.
I can't recall who the chief detectives was at the time.
Okay.
And I forget who the CO was at the time of A&E, but somebody down at headquarters had Bill Ryan jump into an unmarked car, drive down to the UN, make his way through this litany of security to get to where we were down in the bowels of the UN, because he can't just walk in.
No, of course, there's a process, understandably.
Yeah. So he had to go through this whole layers of security, just because you're a detective. That's international territory, by the way. You cannot just walk in on official duty. You have to be invited in. So he goes through this whole litany, finds us. We're rendering safe live letter bombs down in the garage of the UN. It wasn't actually in a garage. It was in this designated area that had access for air, but it was like enclosed in like these steel and I-beams and stuff. It was a really secure area. So if anything was to go off during the procedure, the blast pressure and frag would just go straight up the shaft. It's hard to describe it. It's just this huge shaft, but it's on a garage level, but it's off from it. Right. So we're down there working like this, and he shows up and he said, "Listen, somebody's got to go down." The chief is like, "What are you guys doing?" I says, "Bill, look at what we're doing. You know what we're doing." He says, "No, the chief wants to talk to somebody who knows what's going on here for the last few days, and you guys are still working." He says, "I was told the chief called the CO of the bomb squad, and the CO of the bomb squad told the chief, well, I got senior men working down there." So, and I think at the time I started transitioning to being the intelligence coordinator. So I was kind of like the liaison with everybody.
Yeah.
So they said, go down and pick Sadowy's butt up and put it in the car and bring him forthwith back to the chief's office. And Bill did. I don't know if you remember this story, Bill. You're briefing me as to what's going on in the chief's office and whoever the lieutenant was in A&E. And but the chief wanted to know all the details. So thank goodness Bill was good, because you could be walking into the lion's den and there's a lot of personalities, big personalities with chiefs and stuff and ego.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Bill, for helping to brief me for that ride, Lights and Sirens, back to 1PP.
Well, you never told me this story when you came on. Now I'm upset. You never told me this, but I guess I'm glad I'm hearing it now.
Well, the only reason, Jeff Ingber used to tease me and say, I interviewed so-and-so who worked with you from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Don, you never told me about this, that. Why didn't you tell me? And I said to him, quite honestly, Jeff, I forgot. So like
so much.
I'll hear somebody's name or somebody say something to me, and it'll bring back a memory. But Jeff, Bernard Johnson has been like a big brother to me. I love this guy. We go back to 1977. He was in the State Department working at the U.S. Mission, and I met him across the street working UN security. He invited me up with the ambassador for a ceremony upstairs for the Marine Corps birthday. And the friendship's been there professionally and personally more years than I can count. But yeah, so thank you, Bill, for briefing me, because I didn't know what I was walking into. And that could be a career-ending thing, walking in saying the wrong thing, and somehow it's misinterpreted by some powerful chief with a big ego that his head's so big he can't put a hat on. So, but there were a lot like that. But there were a lot of great chiefs. I want to tell you, one of the best chief of detectives I ever worked for was Joe Borelli. Joe, hands down, he started working out in the bureau many, many years ago. Old school detective bureau boss. And he would talk to you like a gentleman. And, if you asked him, Chief, I'm going to give you everything I got on this case, but please don't release it to the press, to the DCPI, because it's active and we're moving on this as quickly as we can. And he was a man of his word. He
wouldn't do that.
And Chief Anemone, just great. Just two of the best chiefs in my entire career that I ever worked for and had interactions with, and never spoke down to you. Spoke to you, with dignity, no nonsense, but never talked down to you, unlike many of their predecessors.
And let me just say, by the way, now that you mentioned Chief Anemone, let me do a shameless plug here. Chief Anemone, of course, will be coming up next Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. It'll be airing live once again, like this interview is airing on my YouTube channel. So Bill Ryan, I better see you in that live chat for Chief Anemone, and Don, you too. I better see you on my YouTube channel next week. I'll send you the link so you can watch that interview with the chief, who spoke, as I said to you off the air, spoke very well of you. So Bill says, of course, tell Don I said hello. So I'm sure he appreciates that story. And once again, Detective Ryan, I'm glad you're here. So speaking of walking into the unknown, that segues perfectly into getting to the bomb squad in 1985, where you would wind up working the rest of your career until your retirement in 2000. And so, I mean, I talked about New York City, just jumping with crime in the late 70s, early 80s. It's jumping with bomb scares too, because, I mean, the New York Daily News did an article on this a few years ago. It wasn't, I mean, now we look at bombs, we look at terrorism in a post 9/11 world as it being a major, it's a top priority in every major city. It's always on the mind of cops and civilians alike that are just within these cities. But back then, I mean, domestic terrorism, for as crazy as it sounds to say, was really, it wasn't a shocking thing. bombs went off repeatedly throughout the 70s, not just by the FALN, but by the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panthers, the Weather Underground. There were so many different extremist groups, I should say. And in the early 80s, the bomb squad has lost, for brief context, the bomb squad has lost 6 members in the line of duty over its 118-year history. We're going to talk about the 6th casualty, who Don knew personally a little later in the podcast. But the bomb squad could have had more casualties because on New Year's Eve, 1982, Richie Sempt Tony Sempt, I should say, and Richie Richie Pastorella. Richie Pastorella, thank you. We're investigating 4 bombs actually that were planted throughout New York City on New Year's Eve. And think about that for a second before I let Don take it away. Think about this for a second. New Year's Eve in New York City is a big celebration. You see it in Times Square. Everybody's huddled together. You know, it's a big assignment for the NYPD and specifically its Counterterrorism Bureau to monitor. And so here we are. It's 1982. It's New Year's Eve. 4 bombs are planted within a few blocks of each other, including one outside one police plaza in the federal section of Manhattan. Detectives Pastorella and Sempt are dispatched to try to render these devices safe. One of them goes off, severely injuring. Before I continue, Bill Ryan says Jerry Sheehan, who would later command the bomb squad, was the CEO of Arson and Explosion at the time of that story that you mentioned earlier, 1997. So, you know, that being said, I mean, Detective Sempt and Pastorella respond down. Another officer by the name of, I know his first name was Rocco. His last name was Pascarella, I believe, similar to Richie's.
It looks similar, but it's pronounced slightly different.
Yeah.
Now Rocco was the uniformed police officer.
Yeah, he was not in the bomb squad.
Assigned to headquarters security. And again, you know, I don't know if this sounds corny or not, but I'm going to defer to what we were talking to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go back to that moment in time when something happened. You can't compare it to today. Okay. New York City in the world was a different place.
Yeah.
Headquarters security. The sergeant tells them, listen, a bomb went off at the federal building in Brooklyn. We got bomb threats through 911 that there's a couple of bombs planted out here. Let me verbally paint this picture. It's New Year's Eve, 1982. I was a rookie in uniform on a fixer on a U.S. mission.
Which is a post.
Yeah, a diplomatic post. I remember that like it was yesterday, and I'll tell you why. Of course, because of the memories of this. It was bitter cold. It was a clear night. The winds were whipping, and it was, I don't know what the temperature was, well below zero. Rocco was told with the other officers, go out and check your posts and patrols all around One Police Plaza. One Police Plaza and the whole city was filthy. The city was filthy. There was trash all over the place. There was leftover construction equipment here and there, scattered about around the perimeter of One Police Plaza. They didn't have proper lighting. They didn't have it fenced off. This was wide open. There was newspapers, food trash laid around the perimeter of the building. But that's the way the whole city was at that time.
I talked about it being shown in films and immortalized in films earlier. Yeah, you know.
So what I'm trying to do is paint you verbally a picture, a snapshot, if you will. Rocco was told by the sergeant, go out and check for bombs. What does a bomb look like? I'm being facetious. These men had no proper training.
Of course not.
I'm talking about the uniform officers now. It's New Year's Eve. It is bitter cold. It is the wind is cutting through you like a knife. You're wearing a nylon duty jacket. You're wearing those gray gloves that don't keep your hands warm at all. You got a plastic D-cell flashlight. It's New Year's Eve. You'd rather be home with your wife and family or out with your girlfriend, and you're stuck working. walking around, shining the light, garbage everywhere. And I want to qualify this story because when I went down to Redstone Arsenal for training as a bomb tech initially for my basic training, formal training, the instructors were telling us how screwed up we were up in New York in the NYPD Bomb Squad because members of the bomb squad walked up and kicked the package knowing it could be a bomb. That still makes me angry to think of that. They know the real story now. But when we went down there, we had to defend ourselves from day one. And I talked to the men who were injured that night. And here's what happened. Rocco was walking. It is bitter cold, dark. He's got this cheap little plastic flashlight looking around for a bomb. Again, I ask you, what does a bomb look like?
It could look like anything. There's no way to know.
Thank you. Again, I'm being facetious here.
Of course.
As he's walking around his assigned perimeter, in the dark, trash everywhere, construction stuff laying around, you can't help but walk on some of the trash. I mean, there's that much of it. His shoe brushes against a paper sack that contained a Kentucky Fried Chicken box with a rolled up newspaper stuck in it, like yesterday's lunch, just tossed to the side. Blends in perfectly. What we believe happened that night, in hindsight, and by no means let this not be misunderstood. This is not a criticism of anyone's actions that night. It is not. It's just a description of what happened, which could have happened to anyone. His foot brushes against it as he's walking the perimeter, walking through trash and old construction equipment with his little flashlight. His foot brushes against this paper sack with the Kentucky Fried Chicken box in it. We believe what happened was a hang fire. Now, what is a hang fire? The device consisted of a bullseye mechanical wind-up pocket watch, wired up with a 9-volt battery with DuPont blasting caps and gelatin dynamite that was disguised inside. The arms on the clock were touching the contact to complete the simple circuit to make the bomb go off. These things were not meant to be put together in this manner, of course, but they were. Separately, they're innocent items. We'll put them together. Now you have an improvised explosive device, or a bomb as it was called at the time. By Rocco's foot, gently, he didn't kick it. His foot brushed against it ever so slightly. It was enough to jar that contact to complete the circuit. It exploded violently. It took his leg off right below the knee, not including numerous other injuries to his body, as well as his eardrums and many other injuries. But the biggest injury was he lost his leg below the knee. Richie and Tony are responding from the NYPD Bomb Squad. They're both junior men. One is a bomb tech, one is a dog handler. We had separate training for the men at that time. Again, this is by no means a criticism of the actions of what they did that night. It's just a very
it's just the way it was,
honest description as it was told to me.
Right.
Okay. And again, a little teaser. In my book, I got interviewed by Richie and Tony in the back room of the bomb squad when I first got there. And they sat next to me and put their hands in my hands with their missing fingers.
Wow.
and told me Richie took his sunglasses off and wanted me to touch his face. And he touched my face to read my, I guess, my emotions of the features in my face, and told me in great detail, Richie and Tony, what happened to them that night. And asked me point blank, very calmly, why do you want to come to this squad when this can happen to you? Tell me why you want to be here. That's one of the most difficult questions I have ever answered. But going back to that night, Rocco's on the ground. There's chaos. Everybody in the world is responding now. Officer down, calling frantically for an ambulance. He could bleed out and die. EMTs get there. They're applying, basically, I believe, some type of tourniquet and trying to get his leg with the thought of, an amputation. Bellevue was known for reattaching, fingers, hands, limbs, and stuff like that. They're frantically trying to keep him alive. Richie and Tony pull up. He's screaming that he needs to talk to these officers from the bomb squad. Imagine just being blown up.
That was the most incredible part for me, and that speaks to his character, that despite severe injuries, as you said, in which he could die from, he still wants to say, no, let me tell these guys what happened.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, I still get chills talking about this.
I got chills reading
and
about
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And he's pleading to talk to them. Unbelievable pain. He could die, but he wants them to know exactly what happened. How he believed the bomb went off. And more importantly, he doesn't want that to happen to them. Incredible. Now, Richie and Tony suit up. Procedures are different back then than they are now.
Yeah, there's no robots.
It's a lot different. And again, I would preface this that these were three incredibly brave men. The procedures were back then that you take the explosive detection canine, was High Hat, the German Shepherd. Mm-hmm. Excellent dog, highly trained and experienced. They brought the dog up onto the package. The dog backed off, turned, and sat. That's the response that the dog smells positively explosives. They pull the dog back. What the coordinated efforts, again, procedures are different today, and this is no criticism of the procedures or anybody involved that night.
Of course.
If anything, it speaks to their courage and their bravery.
Absolutely.
The procedure was emergency service set something up over the suspected bomb, IED. They placed a bomb blanket, which was probably about 10 or 12 feet by 10 or 12 feet, with multiple thick layers, maybe 3 inches thick of Kevlar. The thought, again, this is not a defined science, especially back then, was that if the device goes off, the blast pressure and fragmentation don't go out and injure or kill innocent people. Now, it was late at night, but you have a big Chinese community, as you know, down there, Little Italy and Chinatown. Many of the people who live and work there, even late at night, they're walking back and forth as a conduit to make it easy to get, from point A to point B.
Right.
Many of the Chinese people don't speak English. And talking to the people who were there that night, they were trying to get them to move away, but there was this lack of communication because of language. Richie and Tony approached the package again, and Tony said that he's going to be with Richie to be his second set of hands. Because even though one is a dog handler and one is a tech, there's times you need a second set of hands. So Tony had said that to Richie, and they did it's been coined a phrase in certain circles, mostly within the bomb technician community, as doing the long walk. I think the British bomb techs coined that phrase, and we have continued to say that. From the safe area into harm's way, right up onto that package. They did the long walk. They went up there. Now it's on the ground. It's dark. You don't have good lighting. They're going to have to lift that bomb blanket up so they can see the device to work on it. Bitter cold, bone-chilling cold, bad lighting, trash everywhere. Things are unfolding very quickly. Now, I'm talking about this safe and sound and warm in my own home, but things were unraveling that night very quickly. They didn't have on the bomb suits with the helmets. They didn't have the blower assemblies. Now, let me explain what that is. It's kind of a tube that comes off the back of the helmet with a little electric motor in it, with a fan. And what that does, it takes the ambient air that's out here behind you and pushes it through rubber tubes in the helmet that come along the side by your eyes and blow it on the inside, not the outside, the inside of the face shield. That's to prevent condensation. Let me go back again and mention to you, well below zero, high winds that are cutting through you with the cold like a knife. Tony, Richie, they just spoke to a brother officer who just was blown up.
Maimed.
Leg blown off. Could bleed out and die. But all he wanted to do was tell the officers from the bomb squad, this is what I saw, this is what happened. I don't want it to happen to you. I'm a big amateur student of human nature. I think I had mentioned this to you previously when we first spoke. That night, picture yourself responding. There's Rocco Pastorella screaming to talk to you. There's another bomb waiting for you, just like that one. Your heart's got to be beating like crazy. You got to be breathing heavy. You got to be nervous. You got to be scared. You know, we're bomb technicians, but we're still men. We still react to things that everybody else does. We're human. In doing so, they're breathing heavy. Your heart is up. You're nervous. You're breathing. The inside of that face shield is fogging up like mad because of the ambient weather conditions on the other side of the face shield. How are you going to work on a bomb when you bend down if you can't see through your face shield?
It's kind of like driving through a blizzard.
There you go.
You can't see.
They made a decision. And remember, we're talking about New Year's Eve, 1982, not with all the high-tech stuff we have today.
No,
okay?
Not at all. Far from it.
They didn't have the blower assemblies on the helmets. So what they decided was they would release the piece that holds the face shield on and take it off so they can see. Both of them did that. They bend down. They very carefully start to lift the bomb blanket up. And as they lifted it up to see the package with the device, it functioned as designed. It detonated. High order detonation with dynamite. Okay. Now, there has been speculation over the years. Did it go off? Was it just bad timing? That at that moment, the clock ran out of time? Or possibly that it was another hang fire, like the first one with Rocco, that the littlest disturbance of the package, that possibly the points were touching on the clock, and that was just enough to complete the circuit. Could never prove it one way or the other. From experience and knowledge, if I had to bet the pension check, I would probably lean toward the fact that it was possibly another hang fire, because that's what happened with the other one, and that was made exactly the same way as that one.
And that proved to be.
It exploded violently. It lifted them off their feet. They were bent over, like kneeling down, lifted them up backwards and threw them back probably about anywhere from 8 to 15 feet, as told to me by witnesses of that night.
And yet
they were rushed by members of emergency service and EMTs to Bellevue Emergency Hospital, where Rocco was transported also. What happens next is that Charlie Wells came in off duty, Sergeant Wells from home, one of the most experienced bomb techs. He was a tunnel rat in Vietnam, which you can only imagine the stuff that he experienced there, going into tunnels to try to find the enemy and booby traps that they set up, to kill other Marines.
Right.
Charlie Wells comes with another bomb squad detective. I apologize, I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Frank DeChico.
Frank DeChico, thank you. Thank you for that. They're in suit and ties. Rocco's just been transported away. Richie and Tony are fighting for their lives, being transported out of the area. They show up. Charlie Wells is one of these people who, I guess because of he was a Marine and he served in combat in Vietnam, he's one of the most calmest people under stress that I ever met in my life. The stuff is hitting the fan. Things are going on around him. He stays nice and level. Doesn't raise his voice. Talks in a very clear, concise way. He walks over. He's looking at the scene. Oh, by the way, there's another bomb.
There's 4 planted in one night. That's kind of, and I can't tell this story as well as you are.
No, but I thank you for injecting some of these things. But my focus now is telling you, and I heard the story from the people who were there, from Charlie himself. You should.
I'm trying.
Charlie.
I'm trying hard, and hopefully, listen. I mean, let me just send a message to a couple people. Hopefully, Inspector Wells comes on. But to Inspector Wells and to Dan McNally, I say this, and of course, I say this kiddingly. But Bill Ryan has already sat in this chair. Don Sadowy sitting in this chair now. Don and I have been talking for 2 hours. Wow, time's really flying. To Dan and to Inspector Wells, you're next. Time's coming. You're coming on this podcast. You are next. I'm coming for you. Anyway, continue.
So anyway, Charlie Wells says he finds Richie Pastorella's fingers that were blown off on the plaza.
Wow.
Richie had a ring on his finger that was a miniature detective shield with a diamond in it. Charlie tells me he gathers the fingers and he quickly gives them to officers to give to EMTs to put them in ice and transport them to the hospital with the thought possibly of reattaching his fingers. But he took the ring off the finger and he put it on his hand with the hopes that this was going to give him good luck in dealing with the next devices. And they went up. They did the most dangerous thing you could do as a bomb tech. It's called a hand entry. It's the absolute last resort. To put it politely, and I know you want me to keep this polite, we call times like that testicles to the wall.
Yeah.
They went up. They got on their knees. They blessed themselves. Believe it or not, a lot of bomb techs used to keep a rosary in their pocket. A lot of the old timers. They won't say it, but they did.
They did.
And they blessed themselves. And Frank held it, and Charlie cut into it, and he cut the wires, rendered it safe, with very, very little time left on the clock.
He won a Medal of Valor for that, by the way,
Yes.
as he should have.
Yes. And there's actually, they built a little building because of the influx of visitors that come to One Police Plaza. Instead of them getting all backed up in the lobby, going through the x-ray machines and everything, they built a little building, one-story building on the plaza before you go into the inner perimeter. And it's where, like, you can go in and take your package and get it x-rayed, and you walk through a magnetometer, and then they give you a pass, to go in the building.
Mm-hmm.
On the outside of that building, up about 8 feet above the door, there's a brass plaque put up there. Rocco, Richie, and Tony, their names are on that with the date. And just a little sentiment of explaining what happened here at that time. So that's basically New Year's Eve, 1982. I was part of the squad by then.
You got it there in 1985, and I do, and I can talk with you.
84 right there.
84, actually, my bad. I do, and I could listen to you all day, but we're at 2 hours and 22 minutes, so I'll speed ahead, and because it's been such a fascinating chat with you, and obviously you've led a very fascinating life. So you get to the bomb squad in 84, and there were some cases. I'll have to bring you back to discuss them more in depth. Obviously, there was Larry Davis, which you responded to, the manhunt for him involving some pipe bombs. We'll have to dive into that case deeper another time.
Sure.
There was the Mad Bomber as well, Dennis Malvasi, that he came around
committing
various bombings also around 1986, 87, and that you'll come back for.
That's a very lengthy case, as you know.
Yes.
In the book.
And we're going to, in the future, we're going to dedicate an episode to that.
Yeah.
So that there was that, and he was another dangerous individual. But the case that, a couple of things I want to talk with you, and we're also doing an episode, hopefully, on the future, on 96 TWA Flight 800. But
another lengthy and interesting case.
And hopefully in the future, there'll be 3 separate episodes at various points. I don't know when, but we'll dedicate an episode to Larry Davis, the Mad Bomber, and TWA, because there's not enough time, unfortunately, to fit it in here, although I really wish I could. But the case, 2 things I want to touch on. The last thing is September 11th, and a man that you worked with and loved that was one of the many heroes that was lost that day. But the first thing before we get to September 11th is the case that really defines your career, or one of the defining cases of your career, at least, and that is February 26, 1993, bombing of the World Trade Center, the first attack on the Trade Center. So I'll set the stage and you take it from there. It's February 26, 1993. It's a dreary winter day. It's snowing. It's sleeting. It's your typical winter day in New York City. Terrorists led by Ramzi Youssef drive, for those of you that are listening, you can visualize it. Those delivery trucks that we see, the Ryder trucks and things like that. They're driving one of those trucks. They have a bomb loaded into that truck, and they have planned this for a while. These were even though they're evil, they're not stupid. They were very skilled men in this regard. And unfortunately, they chose to use their skills for evil as opposed to good. They parked the truck underneath the North Tower. They're in the parking garage in the North Tower. There was a 20-foot fuse, and I don't mean to be humorous. This is not funny. People died. 6 people, as a matter of fact. But if you watch the Looney Tunes, they light the fuse, and the fuse goes, and TNT blows up. You see, anybody that grew up watching cartoons knows what I'm talking about. They did that, except this is very real. They leave, get out of Dodge, go around the corner to watch the result of their evil work. A few moments later, the bomb detonates, killing 6. Now, before I get to Don, he's over at the bomb squad offices, which was at the time housed above the 6th precinct. He's with his partner, Steve Berberich, another great bomb squad detective who hopefully I can have on someday. Don, take it from there.
He was in the basement working, pulling up some old cases, going over them. And Steve comes down to grab me and he says, Lieutenant Walter Boza, wants us to grab our black bags and head down to the World Trade Center. He's down there with Detective Steve Dodge. I says, what are we going to do down there? It sounds like it's an industrial accident, which initially that's what they thought. We go down there, and it's, it just hard to describe because you really didn't see a lot of pictures in the media from that. It's 5 levels down. The hole is the size of a football field for 5 levels. Everything went down, got blown, crushed, went on fire. 1,200 pounds of urea nitrate, which is highly unstable, with hydrogen tanks as a booster for basically enhancing the fireball. It's chaos. There was no coordination between agencies back then. We come back again the next day and the next day. It happened lunchtime Friday. Sunday, the FBI shows up with the ATF National Response Team. It's like being between 2 national football teams. The Dave Williams was the FBI boss, flown in from Washington. He's going to be in charge of the crime scene. He asked everybody to gather in the catering room, the ballroom of the hotel, which the blast blew up through. An hour or so later from when the blast went off, it was supposed to be a sports award luncheon. Trophies were still thrown all over the floor for a local school sports award luncheon with parents, students, and teachers. That was very sobering to think of that and stand there. We pulled chairs together. Dave Williams says, look, FBI isn't going to be able to handle this by themselves. We need the cooperation of everybody. So why don't we just go around the room, stand up, give your name and your rank, what agency you work for, and what expertise you have. I have been going up and down in that hole since it happened. Well, actually the next day, Saturday and most of Sunday morning. Steve Dodge went down. I went down. Pete Dalton went down. But we went and explored different areas. Don Haldeman from the FBI, he was going down there in a separate area. Mccarthy Era from the FBI, 2 great FBI agents. We had a gentleman who was still missing, who worked for food services. And we kept thinking, this man might still be alive. He might be under some debris, maybe not able to shout or talk. I had tools on my belt. I had a K-bar knife with the back of it. It's almost like a hammer. And I would tap against the cement or metal or pipes and call out his name and listen. Nothing. So this is what was going on the past day and a half.
And you're referring to, before we continue, you're referring to Wilfredo Mercado, who is one of the 6 victims of this attack.
Yes. Thank you, because I'm getting older now and I'm forgetting names. Anyway, We come back out. There was no stairs. The stairwells were gone. The ramps, 24-inch thick cement with rebar, gone. Whole floors gone. Stairwells gone. The only way to get down there was to very carefully to climb. Very carefully to climb. Anyway, on a separate note, it's in my book. I sat and said some prayers to my dead partner, asking him for God's help that morning, that Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon, Dave Williams and Mccarthy Era from the FBI said we should put a team together of forensics people, sketch artists, photographer, swab samples, measurements, to lead a team down there. But they all have to be volunteers because it's pretty dangerous. There's no light. There's no power. The water was still flooding down from the broken water main. More importantly, the waistline was broken. It was pouring down into that pit. Later on, caused us some medical problems, which we didn't realize at the time.
Right.
Super cold, was like being in a wind tunnel. I was asked to lead a team down there, and I did. And methodically, again, I'm curious by nature. I took a guy from ATF with me. He was a recently retired soldier from the U.S. Army, and he worked in EOD, which is mirrors
Explosive Ordnance Division.
Disposal, which mirrors what we do, but they have a different mission. They have an IED, a suspected IED. They set up a countercharge. They get back. They crank it off. Off they go. We don't do that. We have a crime scene to process. So it's different procedures. But he was brand new onto the National Response Team. Very, very knowledgeable man. Mm-hmm. But this is where my knowledge from going to Brooklyn Automotive High School and car parts played a big part. And my old partner, Larry Riccio, who helped train me, him and Jeff, he was in auto crime, and he taught me about confidential VIN numbers. And I'm not gonna say any more about that because it's a very interesting story and it's very lengthy. It's in my book, and I'm seeing something here that says Don the Human Q-Tip, Sadowy. Ask him, Jerry Sheehan from A&E, him and Bill Ryan. I'm in an air shaft. Now, there's the bowels of the complex are underground for heating and air conditioning and everything. I'm in an air shaft. I'm searching for minute evidence. I'm going through different levels through an air shaft, and it gets real narrow. I got a radio on me, and I got my fat butt in a Nomex jumpsuit with a helmet and boots and gloves on. And I don't know what level where I am because this thing snakes all over the place. And I'm saying, holy crap, I don't want to get trapped in here, and I don't know what level I'm on. There's 5 levels, and everybody's working separately like coal miners, okay?
Right.
I get stuck in there, and I take my K-bar, and I knock out one of these louver vents, and I scare the Jesus out of a couple of guys working right up above them, because there's noise and everything. And I'm trying to get their attention. Hey, it's me. Who the hell? Who is that? I says, it's me, Sadowy. I'm stuck up here. I says, what level am I on? That was it. Everybody started teasing me. Now, in the morning and in the evening, there's a briefing. At the evening briefing, it looked like, now remember, I'm in a jumpsuit, work gloves, helmet, and everything. I had a respirator on. All you could see clearly is my eyes. I'm like a raccoon. I'm covered with soot, like I was dipped in it. And Jerry Sheehan said something at the briefing with the FBI as, let's hear from the human Q-tip, Detective Sadowy from the Bomb Squad. Tell us what you did today, Don. And it was really funny. It was really funny. So that was my nickname from Lieutenant Sheehan.
The rest is history. But we get to the critical part of the investigation, and obviously this is an all hands on deck effort, and that is the discovery of the chassis frame, which would lead to the bombers. Now, I'll set the stage again, and you can handle it. And of course, we're talking with Don Sadowy, retired NYPD Bomb Squad detective, second grade, here in the Mike and Navy podcast. For those of you that will be listening to this via audio and not via video later on, I do want to say that this will be, given the length of the podcast, I will be splitting this into 2, potentially 3 parts, so that you can hear each part and really savor this great conversation. So anyway, as I was saying, the chassis frame, this is a gamble at the time that was something that earned you some scorn, but obviously you did the right thing. And it, like I said, it led to the bombers. You're looking around, you're conducting your investigation. And
I found broken pieces of a differential. That's the gears in the back where the axles come in.
Right.
Now, I've been involved where cars were blown up, organized crime, change of command. Big Paul Castellano, his crew, after he was assassinated. I knew what car parts were, but I never saw the powertrain separate. So that's what caught my eye. The housing I put back together with the gears like an egg. Now, how did I know that? Was because my experience in Brooklyn Automotive High School. I put it back together, sitting on a slab, broken slab. And I had the gentleman from ATF. It wasn't an agent. I think his title was explosive specialist. So he's asking me, what's this, what's that? And I says, I know this because of high school. So then I put it back the way it was. And I saw there was a tremendous amount of pressure that came down on this. This had to be from the vehicle that held the bomb, because of the posture and the breaking of the way this broke. Now my curiosity's up. Now we're working with a flashlight. We're going a broken slab, like 24 inches thick of cement, about 35 feet long, being only held on by rebar. We're crawling along the edge in the darkness. This stuff is all carbon coated, from the fire, the fire of the blast, with the hydrogen tanks enhancing the blast with a fireball. Everything's burnt and twisted. Pull up some rubble, and we find about a 4 or 5 foot length of chassis frame, twisted and bent like a piece of licorice. Then I remember Larry Riccio, my old partner who helped train me. He was Jeff Matlin's partner. He went to auto crime and went to the bomb squad. He used to say to me, Don, what the heck do you do to take apart a bomb safely? And I'd say to him, how do you figure out, stolen car parts? So we talk like 2 old yentas, and we're still best of friends. And he told me about confidential hidden VIN numbers. It was like a light went on in my head from Larry. Took my glove off. Took my thumb. The metal is in kind of like the shape of the letter C. And that's the chassis frame, but it's all twisted, bent, and burnt. Took the glove off. I stuck my hand in, and I ran my thumb back and forth inside. What I felt was an encoded, it was a star shape, 3 letters, about a dozen numbers, and ended in a star shape. Mm-hmm. Now, on most metal, it's either stamped in or raised. This wasn't. It was dotted. It was just dotted, but I could feel it. And I knew in my heart, this had to be from the vehicle. that brought the bomb in. And why do I say that? Because the other vehicles were crushed and burned, but they weren't completely blown apart. Not with the powertrain and the frame. At this time, I was the team leader because I knew how to get people down there and get them out. And everybody who went down there was warned. You don't have to go. This is very dangerous. We can have debris slide down on us. Again, there's no stairwells. There's no ramps. You got to just climb down very carefully.
Talk about a long walk. It's a long climb.
So we're down on a B2 level, stretched out on the edge of this broken slab. Again, complete darkness, bitter cold like a wind tunnel, just working with flashlights. The rest of the team went to a pristine area that I picked out that wasn't disturbed. So they're doing photographs, measurements, they're doing swab samples and things, on surfaces that I thought was pristine, for integrity purposes, for evidence for the guys in the lab. So at this time, I get a call on the radio. It's the FBI dispatcher. There's no coordination now. This is like the third day into this, this massive thing. Everybody's on different radio frequencies. She tells me that the Port Authority is telling her that the MTA has a train stuck in the tunnel from Jersey, but they want to back it out to get it out of there and assess any damage to the train. They want to salvage the train, but it may cause an avalanche of debris where we are. And there's no way for her to contact them. She just got the heads up. Said, tell everybody, drop what they have and just get the hell out. You got 15 minutes to get out. That's it. Just get out. Well, I go back. I talk to the team. I said, this is too important. They asked me why. I told them why. I said, gather up what we have. I'm gonna climb up topside with this gentleman from ATF. Guys from crime scene knew me from working with them over the years. And I said to the guys from ESU, I need a Stokes basket. I need 2 body bags. I need it right now, and help me get it down below into the hole. I told the guys from crime scene, we're going to have to put this stuff in your station wagon, and you're going to drive like hell to get to the police lab. I said, this is really important. So, I mean, we're doing this like as we're running and climbing. Mm-hmm. We get down below, we drop the Stokes basket down, throw the 2 body bags down. Everybody's on the same page. We had people from ATF, FBI, our crime scene, our crime lab. We had a guy from the explosives laboratory from Washington, D.C. with us. I mean, that's unheard of. Those guys never come out of the lab. Yeah. Okay? So we were fortunate. We had a diverse group down there, but we were all on the same page after I talked to them. And they were kind of nervous because we were really sternly warned by Dave Williams from the FBI, the big boss from Washington. Do not disturb anything. Do not bring anything out. Just go down there and do that basic, survey of the area and then out. I said, whatever happens, I'll take the heat for this, but this is too important. I'm not a boss fighter. I never disobeyed an order in my life. This is the one time. And we put it in the 2 body bags. Now, why did I say to do that? The reason I said to do that was because bad guys watch TV. They're probably still hiding here somewhere within the city or around the city. Mr. Mikado, God rest his soul. We wanted to give the impression we were bringing Mikado's body out in the 2 body bags wrapped together with the car parts in the Stokes basket. Put it into the station wagon. As we were doing that, I went up and talked to the patrol bosses and cops who were bored out of their mind up on street level. I said, this is so important, guys. I really need your help. What do you need, detective? I says, I need you to form a line of vehicles across West Street. Nobody goes south. Nobody goes north for five full minutes. we got some evidence here that's so important for the case, but we can't let the media know what we have. So let them think it's Mercado's body. It's not. But please, I need your help. They were all smiles. The sergeants looked at the men smiled back. Detective, you got it. They put their coffee cups down, put their cigarettes out, got into vehicles, and I said, wait, I'm going to give you a signal. That vehicle is going to come flying up this ramp, lights and siren, and they're going to head south. And then they're going to go around the horn, come up the FDR Drive, and go to the police academy, go into the basement, and then go up to the lab with the equipment on the elevator. I gave the signal. All the cops pulled their radio cars across, made a wall, made sure nobody can drive up on the sidewalk. They formed a wall with the vehicles. The car comes leaping out of the ramp, lights and siren. It's a marked crime scene vehicle. Mm-hmm. Hauling butt, going south. The media went crazy, cursing and yelling at the cops because they want to follow in their minivans with their cameras. So they figured, they saw there was a body bag and a Stokes basket in the back of the station wagon. So they figure it's Mercado's body. So they turn around and go north, go up to Work Street. They're going to cut across, and then they're going to go to the east side to the ME's office. Our guys from crime scene. Oh, and I put an agent from the FBI from the lab with an female agent from ATF together for integrity. Mm-hmm. That we don't lose sight of the evidence in the chain of custody. I'm thinking ahead now. For integrity of the evidence. Don't lose that chain of custody. I pushed them into the back of the station wagon with that evidence. They went off. They went to the police academy. They went downstairs. I got on the horn and I called up the lab. I know some of the guys in the lab and said, listen, this is really important. Need to, I think I found the vehicle hidden VIN number. Okay, Don, we got it. They get up there. And a lot of the federal officers are up there, and they don't want you to touch nothing. They waited, actually, truth be told, they waited for them at 5 o'clock to go to meal. John Sardone and his partner picked up the evidence with gloves, took it into a closed room, locked the door behind them, put it into a vise. True story. Got two 24-inch pipe wrenches. Put both of them on there, and both of them bent the poop out of this metal to expose the inside. They hit it with an acid wash and took 2 Polaroid pictures. That was the VIN number. They traced it to a rental agency in New Jersey. And the story goes on from there, which I'm giving you as a teaser. The rest of it is in my book.
Which, of course, is Rendered Safe Tales of an NYPD Bomb Tech. So we'll conclude with this. And it's been a great conversation here with Don Sadowy. It's been as good as it has not been as good as I thought it would be. It's been better than I thought it would be. It's really been amazing talking with you. And that is, not by the time 2000 rolls around, you're getting ready to retire. You talk about it in your book, and I don't want to spoil it, but you'll talk about what went into your decision. And then you're working in the private sector, and your role as intelligence coordinator of the bomb squad is taken over by a detective by the name of Claude Richards, who you worked very closely with, and who plays a central role in 9/11 momentarily. I'll share the screen here so you can see, for those of you that will be watching this on YouTube, you can see Detective Richards and what he looked like. This was Detective Richards, for those of you watching, a member of the New York City Bomb Squad, who we'll discuss at length momentarily. You didn't know him as Claude, though. Anybody that knew Detective Richards knew him as Dan. His middle name was Daniel, and so he went by Danny.
When I first met him, he told me he was in the 82nd Airborne, mm-hmm. and he told me it was an Army Ranger, and he gained my respect from day one. And I helped give a recommendation for him to come into the squad, and eventually he wanted to take my spot as intelligence coordinator, and I gave him a sterling recommendation for that. But the funny thing is, he used to tell people, he used to say to Lieutenant Boza, listen, Don was a Marine. He says, I won't hold it against him. And I was an Army Ranger. And the other thing he used to say it like in a whisper, like he was embarrassed. Listen, guys, don't call me Claude. Call me Danny. Don't call me Claude. And a little funny story, off the cuff with this. Steve Burbridge was his partner for a long time before he became my partner. He used to give as good as he got. Guys would tease the hell out of each other.
Yeah.
One day he says something to Danny Richards, and Danny walks out of the back room. That's where we all would sit and talk. And he's back out in the squad room, and he's like, damn that SOB Burbridge, blah, 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 blah. And Burbridge just sticks his head like halfway out of the doorway from the back room. And if you remember that, what was that Alfred Hitchcock movie?
Bates Motel.
Yeah, Bates Motel. He'd stick his face half out, and he'd say, now I can't think of the name of the
Norman.
I'm sorry?
Norman.
The character?
Norman.
Oh, yeah, Norman. You say, Norman, calm down. Come back and see your mother. And, oh, my God. Daddy's head would, like, explode. So that's kind of a little funny joke, a little dark humor between cops.
No, of course. No, we'll talk about him at length in a moment. But September 11th, 2001, you're working in the private sector. And again, there's another episode I'm going to have to bring you back for, just to spend an entire episode on that. But to give you a brief synopsis of Don's experience that day, and you can read about it in his book. He talks about it at length, of course, is he was working in the private sector for Merrill Lynch, which is a financial firm. And the World Trade Center was a financial area. The name tells you World Trade, you're trading. And a lot of financial businesses were in the Trade Center and around the Trade Center. When the first plane struck, Don, of course, his experience as a Marine and as a police detective, went over to investigate. And you saw, as you describe in your book, and I don't want to give it away, horrendous things. And I do want to give a brief, detailed synopsis of what Dan and members of the bomb squad did that day. And if I miss a detail, Don, stop me, because I want to make sure I tell this accurately. Dan was off duty that morning, as many firefighters and police officers were. He was the intelligence coordinator by this point. He had taken over the position from Don upon Don's retirement in 2000. Dan's hours were 10 a.m. to 6:30 in the evening. He heard what was going on, and normally, and this is a testament to how great of a man he was, an intelligence coordinator's battle station would be at the office. You go to the office, you gather information. Is there any other attacks in the works? What's going on here in the country? What's going on around the world? You would gather information. Not Dan. He knew the situation. He knew the amount of people who were in grave danger, including his colleagues. And he arrived at the bomb squad headquarters, where he teamed up with police officer Joe Dolan, Detective Dan McNally, who's a mutual friend of both myself and Don's, and Detective Steve Burbridge. They raced down to the scene, and they arrived moments after the South Tower had collapsed. The North Tower is still standing and fully engulfed and in grave danger of collapsing in its own right. They witness a New York City police sergeant trying to direct people off of the World Trade Center's plaza. And that sergeant is alone, and he's trying to direct people who are trapped on the plaza but can't get out. They survived the collapse of the South Tower, but they're stuck, and they need assistance to get out. Knowing what they know, and of course lending their expertise to the situation, they assist this sergeant, and they act as a letter carry, clearing people off the plaza under indescribable conditions. It is from there that they team up, with members of the emergency service unit. Among that unit, Sergeant Mike Curtin and Officer John DeLara of Emergency Service Unit Number 2, which is based up in Harlem. They go into 6 World Trade Center, which was a building directly adjacent, or also known as the Customs House, a building directly adjacent to the North Tower, to look for more people, get them out of the building, and get them to safety. Dan, the 2 Dannys, McNally and Richards, are with the ESU guys. Steve Burbridge is outside of the building, along with another detective by the name of Michael Mixon, who was also a member of the bomb squad. And what they're doing is they're directing these people to Steve and Mike, and Steve and Mike are subsequently getting these people to safety. As they're doing that, the North Tower gives way. Detective McNally described it as having a mountain fall on top of you. They all lean up against the wall instinctively and held on to each other as tight as they can. Danny Richards, Sergeant Curtin, and Officer DeLara are standing 10 feet, no more than 10 feet behind Danny McNally. And this is everything I'm telling you is a secondhand account of what I've
You got it right. You got it right.
Keep going. Read from and listened to an interview that McNally did and Bergerich as well. The debris of the North Tower crashes through the roof of the customs house. It tears through each floor, and it goes into the lobby of where these men are standing. And it's simply a matter of where they were standing inside that lobby that determined whether or not they lived or died.
Yep.
Dan and the members of the ESU team that he's with are towards the exit of the building. They survive, as do Steve and Mike. But the debris that crashed down through the lobby not only crashed through the lobby, but crashed down into the sub basement of the World Trade Center complex. And it took Detective Richards, Sergeant Curtin, and Officer DeLara with them, and all three men were killed. They would not be found until the spring of 2002. They recovered Sergeant Curtin's March 6th. Today actually is the anniversary of discovering Danny. He was found on March 29th, 2002.
I was just going to say something about that because Steve Burbridge reminded that to me in a message this morning.
Yeah, they found Danny 19 years ago today in the rubble of the Trade Center, 6 months after he had died. And then they lastly found John DeLara 7 months to the day, April 11th, 2002. Detective Richard, Sergeant Curtin, Officer DeLara, and all members of the New York City Police Department who were killed that day were posthumously awarded the highest honor that a New York City police officer can receive, and that is the NYPD's Medal of Honor. That was bestowed to them on Medal Day, December 4th, 2001. So we kind of talked about it. A lot of us, like myself, only know about Danny because of the day and the way that he died, but he was a hero long before that day. You worked with him, you loved him. So when you look back, what are some of your favorite memories of him? And we'll wrap up with that.
Danny Richards was what you would call a real straight arrow. If you saw him standing at the curb on Hudson Street, coming back from getting a sandwich at the deli, and there was a crowd of people waiting for the light to change. When that light changed, you'd pick him out of the crowd. He still walked and talked like an Army Ranger. Ramrod straight, honest as the day is long, hardworking guy, always do the extra mile. One of the funny things that I remember about him, off the top of my head, we had a disagreement. He would go off on a tangent on something, but he would be very emotional about it, that he was absolutely right. And me and Steve Burbridge would say, Danny, there's a chance that there's another answer to this. There's another way to go. And he'd be like, no, I'm telling you, this is the way to go. Okay. So at the end of that, he was kind of pissed at me, and it was time for lunch, and we were going to order Chinese food. And I go for my wallet, and I actually left my wallet at home. And he saw the look on my face, and he comes over in a stern voice and says, what's the matter? And I said, listen, I'm not in for lunch. Why not? I says, I left my wallet at home. Without skipping a beat, he reaches in his wallet discreetly, pulls out a 20 and slips it on my desk, and whispers to me, pay me back payday. All right, so now he's in for lunch. What do you want? So, that's the other thing is too, we played a joke on him. He served in Bosnia with British and Danish soldiers back in the days of Slobodan Milosevic, and he was doing what was called ethnic cleansing. It's rather complicated, but this is when communism was dissolving in the small satellite states in Eastern Europe, Serbia, Bosnia, and all this here.
Right.
And they were literally murdering men, women, and children who were Muslims. Absolutely horrible, but they needed
genocide, basically.
Yeah. What Hitler did to the Jews. And so anyway, Danny volunteered through the State Department. We had many contacts with the State Department over the decades, and it just became stronger as time went by. We had many members who had many special expertise. Danny volunteered with the State Department, and he took a leave of absence for 13 months. He went overseas, he served there, and he helped do a lot of great things. Anyway, that's a story in itself. He comes back, and we find out he's coming back on Sunday night on a 4 to 12. He's flying into Newark from Europe somewhere, and he still has his jumpsuit on, and he's got his soft luggage and everything. So Danny was always into music. So he always used to get like CDs made, which was like semi-legit, okay? He loved music. So we get permission from Sergeant Ahern, take a car, go over there. Don't get involved. Just pick him up from the airport, bring him home to his apartment. So we get there, and we're wearing a disguise. And Steve Burbridge made this like 2x3 sign that said, "Welcome home, Norman." And we got this female supervisor from Customs to play a joke on him that they waited. There's this long line of people coming in on the international flight to get through Customs. We got her to go up with two guys that looked like football linebackers in uniform from Customs. Tell them, "Are you Danny Richards? Give me your passport. Is that all your luggage? Come with me. What do you got in there?" And now he's like, because he's got these music CDs, right? So he's jammed up. So she says, "Not only are we going to search your luggage, come with me." And these two guys get on the side of him. He's carrying his luggage. "Listen, I'm a detective from NYPD Bomb Squad. I'm coming back from Bosnia. Blah 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 blah." Just hold on to that. Where are we going? You're going to go in that room, and we're going to do an inner body cavity search of you. Well, at that point, he was like shocked. And at this point, we all just start laughing. Me and Burbridge walk over. We got like a funny nose and glasses with a mustache on.
Right.
And we're holding this sign that says, "Welcome home, Norman." We're standing in front of him. He doesn't realize it's us. Finally, Burbridge says, "Hey, you SOB." He took the phony disguise off. He says, "It's me and Sadowy, you dummy." And he says, "Look at the sign." And then he reads it out loud. "Welcome home, Norman." And everybody in the airport just lost it laughing. We put him in the car. He appreciated the joke and the lift. We went back to his apartment, opened up a bottle of champagne. We had a sip of champagne and wished him, we're very glad that he's home, safe and sound. One follow-up that I don't think you know.
Tell me, yeah, please.
I want to put it out there in honor of Danny.
Please.
When one of the sergeants and Detective Mulcahy went to Danny's apartment because he lived alone, short distance away from the squad.
Yeah, Greenwich Village.
When they went into his apartment, they went into his desk.
Is this after he died or before?
After he died. Days later, they went up there. They went into his desk and they were looking around the apartment because they wanted to secure, any weapons, his ID and stuff. His detective shield was there in its case, in his drawer of his desk. And next to it was his last will and testament. That's chilling. And we all said when we heard this, he knew he may not be coming home. He was off duty. It shows you the measure of the man. He left his shield and he left his last will and testament next to it in the drawer, that whoever would open that top drawer of the desk would see that. And his brother was alive at the time, and his brother was crippled. He lost his legs in Vietnam.
Bill Richards.
Yeah, and they wanted to let him know, and they secured any and all valuables that were there. But I'll end talking about Danny. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't, and it really, you said it does speak to the character of the man. I didn't know that at all, and I'm glad that you shared that here. He, like I said, he was off duty, and as I described earlier, moments later, as that North Tower collapsed, Danny was among the 23 New York City police officers who responded to those towers, saved numerous people, and ultimately sacrificed their lives in the line of duty to do so. I want to conclude with this.
Yes, sir.
A couple notes on Dan. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. I've loved every minute of this, Don. I mean,
Thank you.
And I'm going to bring you back as long as you want to come back.
My pleasure, Mike.
As long as you want to come back, you're welcome back anytime. But, you know, what was I going to say? I want to get my train of thought back, and I do want to read something.
We covered a lot.
We did, but it was something in regards to this, Dan, and I do want to bring this up as you mentioned that story when he left his will
And his shield.
And his shield being there. God, there is something here that I do want to share. His brother, he would take care of his brother.
Yes.
And his brother actually did end up passing away from those injuries. I hate when this happens. I'm forgetting my train of thought, but
I can't throw stones and make fun of you because I go through that every day.
Yeah, no, it's something you know. It is definitely, you know,
You get a little brain fog.
Right. Yeah. Basically, I was just going to say he led an incredible life, and I'm trying to trace it back. I mean, he showed remarkable calm under really dire circumstances, and
I think you would find that with just about every member of the bomb squad that I ever worked with. You know, the whole world could be coming to an end, and these bomb techs, they stay focused, razor sharp focus, that no matter what's going on around them, they're going to take care of business.
And that's what he did. And I guess what I'll conclude with, and I'll remember it later, and I'll kick myself for it. But we'll conclude with what Danny McNally said about Dan Richards in October 11th, 2001 Newsday article, a month after he died. It says, quote, from Dan McNally, Dan Richards was the kind of man who knew the difference between right and wrong, and he knew the difference between difficult and easy. But he would never let something difficult stand between him and doing something right. He was a man who was comfortable in his own skin. And I do like to say that this episode is going to be a 3-part special, and for what it's worth, it's dedicated to his memory. And I'm very glad that I got to.
And I think it's a credit to you too. And you notice that today is the anniversary when his body was recovered.
Yeah. He charged a lot of guys that day, charged into harm's way, and like I said, 23 of them didn't come back. But you know, I do. You know, I don't know. I think the reason I get this brain fart is because what you told me about that just sent me some chills down my spine. I did never know. But his picture does hang up on the Bomb Squad's memorial wall. And for those of you listening, you know, you didn't. If you didn't know him, take the time to read about him. And also, for those of you that knew him that will watch this and will listen to this, and we'll wrap up with this. If you knew Danny, just know, and I know you miss him. I know every day without him is tough. But his story, his life is still impacting people all these years later. I never knew the man. I was 1 year old when he died. And look at how his life and his story still impacted me. And that's a testament to him and every member of the NYPD that responded that day, especially the 23 that did not come back.
Well, that's a testament to the work you do to keep his memory alive, you know. And I'm glad I shared that last thing about him, about his detective shield was in its case.
Shield number 244.
In his top drawer desk, and right next to it was his last will and testament. So he knew before he went out the door. He didn't have to go. He was off duty. Like you said, his job should have been just going back to the bomb squad office and coordinating. He willingly put himself in harm's way, but he knew. I spoke with Tony Biondillo, who was a sergeant, and Dennis Mulcahy that after that happened, and I read some other stuff that they found that, and it's quite obvious. He thought he may not be coming back. again, it's a testament to the man's character.
Well, this concludes an incredible episode of the Mike the New Haven podcast. It's going to be a 3-part special. It was long, and then for those of you that are watching this, I hope that you still enjoyed it. Bill Ryan's still sticking around. I appreciate that. I don't care that it was long. It was great. I could sit here and talk to you all day, Don, and I'm glad you came by. So Don's book is rendered safe. Tales of an NYPD Bomb Tech. I'll show it. I do want to share for those of you that are watching before we wrap up here.
There's many other stories, but these are some of the highlights. But I go into great detail in the book on speaking about many of these incidents and these cases that I hope that people will find interesting. It really summarizes that 20-year period of all the things that were going on in New York City at the time, and went into detail as much as I could, and being very honest in my feelings and emotions as I experienced those things.
So, like I said, the book is rendered safe. Tales of an NYPD Bomb Tech. Buy it, hard copy. However you get your books, please do.
We're on Kindle. We're on Kindle also.
Kindle as well. Online, hard copy. However you purchase your books, buy it. You won't regret it. I finished it in 5 days. It was so good.
Amazon Books was self-published.
Amazon Books. Just Google it. Everything will pop up, and you can get this book. If you want, subscribe to the podcast. We're on all audio platforms that are out there. Of course, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, MC's Audio, MC''S Audio, where you can get the video version of this podcast. And of course, stay tuned for more great episodes. I do want to just conclude, like I said, by saying that this book is something that you definitely should read. This episode, this special, is dedicated to all the great members of the NYPD's Bomb Squad, past and present, who do great work every day, and to the families of the 6 Bomb Squad members that have died in the line of duty. Lieutenant Giuseppe Petrosino, Detectives Ferdinand Socha and Joseph Lynch, Officer Vincent Connolly, Officer Brian Murray, and lastly, as we just finished talking about, Detective Danny Richards. We dedicate this episode to their memories. So on behalf of Don Sadowy, I am Mike Cologne, and we will see you next time.